spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that. Though, because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone, and of his own accord, would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is, the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worse. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Julio Rivera is going to drop by in our second hour to debate me over the issue of repealing and replacing our police departments. Dr. Jhacova Williams is going to be here about black deaths at the hands of law enforcement and how that is associated in particular communities with historical lynchings in those same communities. It's actually like, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And we're going to be talking about insects and farmers and Gone with the Wind. And there's just a whole pile of stuff we're going to get to today. But our first hour, as always on, or as usually on Wednesday, first hour, is our National Town Hall meeting with our old buddy, Congressman Mark Pocan. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the number one big cheese progressive in Washington, D.C. He also represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. His website is pocan.house.gov, P-O-C-A-N, and you can tweet him at Rep, as in Representative, Rep Mark Pocan, Representative Pocan. Welcome back to the program. What's on your mind today? What are you looking at as you look out at the at America? And what pops to the top of your list?
I used to spend 90% of my weeks on COVID-19. These days, certainly we've had a shift with trying to deal with systemic racism, police violence. I think, the important things to mention today, there's a hearing in the Judiciary Committee on the policing bill introduced by the House Democrats. We also officially got word that we're going to be back in June 25th and 26th. To take up those bills. So next week, the committee will actually vote on it. They had a hearing this week, and then the following week we'll be in as a full Congress to take it up, along with some other bills. And we're still waiting for the Senate to come to the table to work with us on another COVID bill, which is very, very unfortunate because our state and local governments are hurting. Our frontline workers need protections, and many small businesses have run out or will be running out this week out of their PPP loans, and we don't have anything else in place, and certainly business hasn't come back for many of those businesses. So there's a lot on the plate. We're juggling a few issues, but we are going to be coming back in to deal with them and dealing on the 25th of June specifically on a policing bill.
I should add, by the way, that Congressman Pocan is with us here for the hour, taking your calls at 202-808-9925, and there are, as they say in the radio business, lines open. Congressman, policing is sort of at the top, not sort of, it's at the top of a lot of people's minds, as well as the naked voter suppression, that we saw in Georgia yesterday, the Republican Party's. And apparently not just Georgia. It happened in several other Republican-controlled states as well. The number one voter suppression technique or technology that Republicans have used for years is to force people, particularly people of color, but also people in low-income white neighborhoods, people where there's in neighborhoods where there's a large elderly population, basically, and college students, to stand in line for hours and hours and hours in order to vote. And now they're fighting vote by mail aggressively. There was no story on today's on the app on the New York Times about Georgia yesterday, but there was in the Washington Post. I read the entire story. It's titled "In Georgia, Primary Day Snarled by Long Lines, Etc." There was literally no mention of the fact that the vendor that they got for their voting machines was not the one recommended by their independent commission, but instead was one of Brian Kemp's biggest donors, number one. And number two, there was no mention of the fact that this is actually a Republican voter suppression strategy that they've been using for forever, frankly. So between that and what's going on with policing, I'm curious your thoughts on those issues.
There are two issues I could talk each one about an hour, but let me say briefly on voting. This is yet another example. Wisconsin was an example in April of why we need to get people to vote early or vote absentee, even better, so they don't have to deal with these issues. And we shouldn't have to be resorting to that. It should be that you can go and not have to wait a long time to be able to vote and have your voice heard. But unfortunately, these suppression tactics are part of the election tactics of many Republicans. So we're going to have to really get the word out about voting by absentee. On policing, this bill by the House Democrats is a bill, and it's pretty comprehensive in many ways. But there's so much more that still has to happen. And largely, police departments are run by local governments, and that's where we have to really affect that change even more so. So there's a lot of conversations we can have about it, but I think the good news, and I always look for good news, Tom, is the polling really is showing people across the country have woken up to this, and you really are a serious single-digit outlier if you don't think it's hard to be a black American and have to have interaction with the police, and I think that's good. So we may finally be able to resolve some of these issues.
I think we looked back, and then I'll be done. Joyce has got some calls lined up ready for you here. But it seemed, my sense of it is that the Me Too movement we noticed in the rearview mirror. I mean, when the Harvey Weinstein stuff came out and Ronan Farrow's article was published, which kind of blew open the door. It wasn't until maybe 6 months or a year later when people were looking back going, that was the turning point, and America will never be the same again. Sexual harassment in the workplace and all, a whole spectrum of forms of sexual violence will just simply not be tolerated any longer, including even joking about it. I think this is a similar turning point. I don't think that we'll be able to look back and see all the specific examples and people who lost their jobs and, things like that over it and around it, probably for 6 months or a year in retrospect. Same with Me Too. I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah, in fact, Tom, I would even argue I see a little more intensity right now because we're actually moving legislation in Congress, and we haven't had a bill around reining in police for a very long time. I think the last bill, also Ayanna Pressley has a resolution condemning police violence. I think the last one that was before Congress was, I believe it was 1999 by Danny Davis. So, this is long overdue stuff going back to the 60s. But I really feel that we're watching legislatures move, local governments move, and Congress moving. And that's what we really needed to do and hadn't for way too long.
Yeah, amen. Okay, let's pick up some phone calls here. It's anything goes. It's middays with Mark, Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, taking your call. Say what?
I said anything can go too. That's all good.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, thank you. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us. Martina in Madison, Wisconsin, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Americans and have to have interaction with the police, and I think that's good.
Martina? No Martina. Okay, you got to listen to your phone, not your radio, because there's an obscenity delay in there. Nancy in Elkhart, Indiana. Nancy, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Congressman. Is there a reason? Oh, I'm sorry. Might there be some reason that when they're reorganizing the police departments, that perhaps, and I think it's a reason I'd like to know, that police officers shouldn't be required to have a college degree of some kind?
It's amazing that you bring that up, Nancy. It's almost as if I prompted you, and I don't know you. A bill that Jhacova Hayes from Connecticut and I introduced, and Jhacova Hayes is a freshman whose husband is a police officer, is a bill to have uniform standards of training for police officers across the country. So whether you get an interaction with a law enforcement officer in Georgia, Michigan, California, wherever, that that every officer has had an equal level of training and you know what to expect from that interaction. And all too often, all you need is a high school degree, and that's it. We also address those standards on education, like you brought up, and a few other things.
Great. Congressman Mark Pocan with us, taking your calls. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He represents Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives, at least the 2nd District of it. And his website, pocan.house.gov. His Twitter handle is repmarkpocan, M-A-R-K-P-O-C-A-N. We'll be back with your calls for him in just a moment.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan. And welcome back. Mick in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning. Yes, gentlemen, how are you? I hope you're all well.
Your question?
I'm standing strong, well, and safe, and I hope you are too. Now, the question is, I presented this to you both before the coronavirus pandemic began to become an issue. There were still people doing the normal routine. I was told it was a premature question. I asked to you both again. Let's have a discussion about a vice president because, as you know, both people that are currently in the government are of age to where the virus could put them in a different place. And we're not talking about the political stance of the women that currently could be chosen. I think it's important, especially in lieu of the police violence. Could you address this and a little more thoroughly this time than the last time we talked?
Sure, Nick. So, I know that right now Vice President Biden's team are calling people like myself and seeking advice. And the advice, I think, can be looked at in a couple different ways. One, we know it's going to be a woman who's chosen, and that's good. The next question is, who is that person going to be? Are they going to be looking at things like age differences? Are they going to be looking at things like political differences? Are they going to be looking at things like racial differences in order to put us in the best position to win in November, but also the best position to have someone who can be the president should, as you mentioned, something happen to Joe Biden or Donald Trump, for that matter, on the Republican side. I've talked extensively with, the search team. I do think politics matters, especially, Joe Biden, we know, is more moderate. And I think it's important that, we keep someone who's more progressive in views also on the ticket, because I think that helps make sure we keep our base coming out. But someone also who's competent and able to lead the country in the way we need to right now. So there's a number of names that you've seen that are out there. I'm not sure exactly what direction they're looking at, but I hope they look at an all-of-the-above strategy, includes ideology, because I think that's a very important factor that often isn't looked at.
Yeah. We only have 45 seconds here until the break. Sure. Congressman, do you have any sense of when Joe Biden is going to make a choice?
No, I don't. I don't. Part of the confusion is even the convention, right? The convention's moved. We're not sure what the convention's going to be. This is the earliest we've had a nominee in place for a very, very long time. So even that, I think by June we were first getting state directors in many states, including Wisconsin, swing state. So I think, they haven't given us any direct indication, and I don't know if they have a real game plan on when to release that.
Yeah. So when was the convention supposed to be, and is it going to be held still virtually now from Milwaukee?
We don't know yet. It might be a mix, I think, of some sort. It was supposed to be July. Now it's going to be August, and I think we're still on a holding pattern to figure out what's
fascinating stuff. I am very concerned that by August we're going to have the second wave of virus here. Between the reopenings and the protests and everything else, it's very concerning. Anyway, Congressman Mark Pocan with us, taking your calls for the hour. We'll be right back with more of your calls for him in just a second. Stick around.
Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program.
Hey, we have a new video over at thomhartmann.com for people who are supporters of our program. It is the 12 steps. Common Cause actually put these together, but I boiled them down into a nice little rant on a YouTube video that you can share with friends and neighbors and acquaintances who might be wondering, how did this coronavirus thing get so bad? Why is it that the United States has a third of the deaths in the world? Why do we have over 100,000 dead people, and South Korea has 200, and Taiwan has like 70, and Australia has fewer than 100, and has pretty much squashed the virus? Why is it that only 7 people died in New Zealand? Why are so many other countries doing so well and we're not? Well, there's an answer to that question, and I lay it out in this little video. It's over at thomhartmann.com, and you can grab it there and share it with your friends. And I'll give you a clue. Almost all of it has to do with things that orange guy in the White House either did or failed to do, but it's a great list. You can check it out at thomhartmann.com. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. And Gary in Detroit, Michigan, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Congressman. We're at a point where we're facing probably the greatest economic crisis that we've had since the Great Depression. And with this monumental crisis, and we can see it in the streets, in part because I think we would not have the outpouring and the protests that we have if things were not so generally bad for people, especially millennials. I'm wondering, when things really get bad, what the Progressive Caucus is going to actually do if the majority of the Democratic Caucus does not actually stand up for things that are more significant, like Medicare for all, like debt forgiveness. I mean, I've been a progressive for decades. I've watched so many people just sell out, and I've seen people be co-opted. And to be frank, I don't have a great deal of faith that that's not going to end up happening yet again. And the problem is, if this crisis is not addressed in a progressive way, it's likely to be addressed in a reactionary way, in a fascist way. So you guys need to act boldly.
So Gary, let's get the answer to your question. Go for it.
Yeah, Gary. So first of all, I wish my only problem were other Democrats. The problem we have is we have Mitch McConnell in the Senate who won't even come to the table to do another coronavirus bill when we've passed a bill that has $3 trillion worth of assistance going out. And we have a president in the White House who, as you, I think rightfully said, is starting to act like a fascist. When fascism comes to America, it'll be wrapped in a flag and carrying the cross. Instead, he's carrying a Bible after a fake photo op after gassing peaceful protesters. So those are real entities that we have to fight. So I know sometimes people get mad because if you're a Democrat, we expect more of people, but I don't think right now my problem are fellow Democrats, because we had a pretty decent bill that just came out that got virtually all the progressives' votes on the HEROES Act. My problem is getting Mitch McConnell to the table to do much of anything, getting a president in place that won't just veto legislation we pass. And the main way we take care of that is by being ready for November. And, I certainly hear you. There are certainly times that we fight aggressively within our caucus to get the better ideas done. But right now, that's not ultimately our problem. It's the White House and the Senate that are stopping something as simple as the HEROES Act, which we supported very strongly.
Martina in Madison, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Well, good morning, gentlemen. It's Tom, Mark. My question is, how do we get Ron Johnson out of the Senate?
Yeah. He's your Republican senator from Wisconsin.
Yeah, Martina's from my district in Madison. And, Ron Johnson's been one of those voices that pretends he doesn't see the president's tweets when they're outrageous and bad, and has quite honestly done his own outrageous and bad tweets as a U.S. senator. And, we would have did that in 2016. Russ Feingold would have came back had it not been for 200 to 250,000 Dem voters stayed home because they weren't inspired by the campaign that was run by the Democratic nominee in 2016. People didn't fall for it and vote for Donald Trump. Very few did. They stayed home. And unfortunately, that cost us getting the ability to defeat Ron Johnson. So, I think whether it's Ron Johnson or it's any of these senators from Colorado, Iowa, other states that are swing states right now, even Mitch McConnell himself, I think we can beat. We have some momentum. We have wind on our backs right now because of how the president has handled pretty much everything, but specifically COVID-19, how he's handling the protests right now. He's completely out of sync with the American voters, and Republicans aren't standing up to him. So I think we just need to continue the fight we're doing, stand up for what's right, stand up against the Republicans who just are complete lackeys and sycophants for Donald Trump. And if they're going to drink the Kool-Aid and be a cult member, then they're going to pay a price electorally. And for someone who's up in 2022, we just start organizing now to get rid of those folks as well, like Ron Johnson. So I hear your concern, Martina. I think we've got a good chance to pick up the Senate this year, and I think the Senate and any Republican who's silent to Donald Trump is going to pay a price.
Congressman, just 30 seconds to the break. Is Ron Johnson up for re-election this year?
No, he is up in 2022, so in 2 more years. We have no Senate or governor seats up in Wisconsin this fall.
Oh, that's interesting. And who's your other senator? Forgive my failing memory.
Someone who should be on every short list as a VP possibility, Tammy Baldwin. Tammy Baldwin's an outstanding progressive in the U.S. Senate. Won Wisconsin by 11 points when other statewide folks won by 1 point. A political force.
Yeah, she's good. She's really good. We're hitting the bottom of the hour here. We'll be back on the other side of it with more of your calls for the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the #1 big cheese Wisconsinite progressive in Washington, D.C., Congressman Mark Pocan, or the co-#1, along with Pramila Jayapal, who drops by here occasionally. And we'll be back with your calls for him in just a moment.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. It is the final day, the last day, the last chance to have your contribution to Free Speech TV doubled by Mike in San Francisco, up to $50,000. So call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution, make your voice heard. Here's how I want to help. With a $20 gift, you get a Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the I'm Voting Are You car magnet, your choice. With the $50 gift, you have your choice between the Just Effing Vote tote bag or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, and uniquely, the only thing with the $75 gift is the Thom Hartmann Program mug, which is really cool. The folks at Free Speech TV designed this, and it's they just said, hey, can you send us a picture? We sent a picture, and look at that. With a $100 gift, you can get 2 Free Speech TV face masks, which are really nice face masks that say Free Speech TV on them. With a $120 gift, you have your choice. There's a whole bunch of different options. There is the social distancing kit, which is the 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the Free Speech TV branded hand sanitizer. There is the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. You take your pick of one of these things with a $120 gift. There is the Ask Me About Free Speech TV t-shirt. There is my book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. That book has been out for a few months. It's my newest book that you can purchase right now in the stores. And then there's 4 great books. You take your choice, one of them, if you would like one of those. These are all with a $120 gift. 4 great books on race and race relations in the United States. The new Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, which is this absolutely brilliant look at policing in our prison system, which is particularly, I think, relevant in many ways right now. White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo is a brilliant read. Dear White America by Tim Wise and Uprooting Racism by Paul Kivel. Those 2 books I've not read, I can't speak to, but they come highly recommended to me by the folks at Free Speech TV who worked up this list. And in fact, I'm putting them on my list to read when I'm done writing this book right now on healthcare, which is, I'm just up to here with that. But anyhow, those are your choices, or special bonus for a $120 gift. My newest book, which won't be out for another month or so, but you'll be one of the very first people to get an autographed copy of The Hidden History of Monopoly, How Big Business Stole the American Dream, or Destroyed the American Dream, I think is the word in the title. And, so your choice of one of any of those things with a $120 gift, with a $240 gift to join me for a private meet and greet. It's a private conversation, just a few of us, to discuss whatever's on your mind. If you want to ask, anything about anything that I know about my life, about any way I might be helpful to you in any way, by giving you information during that Zoom meeting, $240 gift, and we've had some fascinating conversations. With a $360 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann University box, 2 Free Speech TV face masks, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, the Just Effing Vote tote bag, the I'm Voting Are You car magnet, the Just Effing Vote t-shirt, and with a $1,000 gift, you can get in line to come visit us here in Portland the next time that when we start doing our show from the studio. I have a feeling it's going to be probably well into the winter, but hey, let's plan in advance. So those are the options, and of course you're also welcome to give absolutely any amount that you're comfortable with. And today, last day, today only now, your gift will be doubled by Mike in San Francisco up to $50,000. So please call now. Make your contribution to Free Speech TV. This network needs you. Our program needs you. Perhaps most importantly, the fate and future of our republic, of democracy itself, of America's standing around the world needs you. So not to lay too much on you, too much responsibility, but this is really a big deal. I wouldn't be here doing this every day if I didn't think it was really important. And I know most of the people working with me would not be doing this if they didn't think it was important. There's other things that people can be doing. And we've got some really talented people. There's some great and talented people at Free Speech TV. We need your help. We'll produce the programming. Free Speech TV will keep the network going, keep the electrons flowing, keep them bouncing off those satellites and on the cable systems and on the internets and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that we need from you, the only help that we need from you is twofold. Number one, tell everybody you know about Free Speech TV so that we can expand our viewership base and thus expand our potential donor base. And number two, if you can afford to right now, call 877-378-8669. Tell them you're watching, tell them what you're watching, and tell them which premium you'd like, and make your contribution to Free Speech TV. It's such a vital time. I realize that we're all getting all kinds of appeals from politicians and everybody else that it's a time of crisis for this country. It is for Free Speech TV too. Please call now and help out. Thank you so much. Coming up on this week's Science Revolution, how do we stop authoritarians like Trump and Bolsonaro from killing more people in this pandemic? Trump and Bolsonaro, the presidents of the United States and Brazil, are essentially refusing to do anything consequential about an epidemic that is killing massive numbers of their own country's citizens. Bill Freese drops by. He's the science policy analyst with the Center for Food Safety on the newly finalized federal regulations on GMOs. And Beyond Nuclear's Paul Gunter also drops by on how America is unprepared for a nuclear accident during this pandemic. Find the Science Revolution wherever you get great podcasts. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. Congressman Mark Pocan, co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, taking your calls for the hour. Jim in Salisbury, North Carolina. Jim, you are on the air.
Okay, thank you very much. My question for you, Congressman, has to do with H.R. 1384, the Medicare for All Act. I'm one of those that have knocked on doors, canvassed communities, made phone calls. We finally got the act there. We've got a piece of paper with an act, yet the leadership of the House, and I'm not sure if it's a leadership, no one's held a vote, regardless of what the Senate would do, to show us that knocked and canvassed that you're serious and just at least hold a full vote for Medicare for All Act. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Jim, so a couple observations. First of all, it is interesting how public opinion can move very quickly, especially on something like Medicare for All. We were doing very well in the polls, in the 60s in most polls, percent support. Then during the presidential primaries, as people try to differentiate themselves, it went down. And there were some, I think, moves that happened during that primary that affected the popular support. And then as soon as COVID happened, we watched the support just leap back up strongly in support of it. Part of that is we have to have that sustained support so we can have more people who are co-sponsors, because if you're going to put a bill for vote, you want it to pass. And we have, I believe, 120-something sponsors. I could be wrong with the number. I haven't looked at it recently, but we need to build more support for it. The public support is there, but we need those folks to call their elected officials to put the pressure on them. So, again, I think, we know that this is something that we need in this country. We're the only industrialized country that doesn't have universal health care for its people. This is, I think, the best way. That's why I'm a strong supporter of Medicare for All, but we just got to keep that support up. But putting a bill on the floor that may not have the votes, I don't think is the best approach to help to continue to build the momentum that we need to build. But getting more people to co-sponsor to get to a magic number where you have that 218 votes you need in Congress is really what's key.
Dee in Chicago, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, gentlemen, and thank you so much for wonderful work and great information. Congressman, we just heard about Georgia. What have we got of good news that will counter the voter suppression coming up for the big election? We need help.
Yeah, Dee, so I'll tell you, people don't like this answer, and I guarantee I'll see some tweet replies to this, but elections have consequences. And with Mitch McConnell in the Senate, Donald Trump in the White House, we're not going to get the things done that we would like to at the federal level. So we need to act at the local and state levels where we can to get better protections in place. We need to fight to make sure that things like H.R. 1, the very first bill we passed out of Congress, and other bills become law and reality when we have a different president to put in place. And in the meantime, we have to convince people that if they want to have their voices heard, they're going to have to request absentee ballots and vote early and do things other than wait until Election Day, especially in the era of COVID-19. My state in Wisconsin, we saw what a disaster that April election was. But fortunately, 71% of the people decided to vote absentee, and over 80% of the people who requested a ballot actually filled it out. So it's a good way we can still get the vote out. We just have to vote a little bit differently, like we're doing many things differently under COVID-19. And you have to work with the candidates you support, and if it's the Democratic Party or whoever, whatever entity that you work with that's helping to get those absentee requests in and get those votes done, that's what's going to be key looking at November.
So you're thinking that for those states like Texas, where you literally have to have a doctor's slip in order to request an absentee ballot, that basically there's nothing that can be done at the federal level because of Mitch McConnell in the Senate?
We've tried, right? We've passed bills. They're sitting Mitch McConnell's desk. Lawsuits will take too long to get done, likely by November. Pardon?
Yeah, H.R. 1, your first piece of legislation, addressed this problem.
And others. And we took out just the pieces that elected, just relating to November and did pass those as well. They're all sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk. But people can still early vote. We have to organize people around that. We're going to try to have a standard in a bill coming up. Ideally, it would be vote by mail. But again, I don't think Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell are going to allow that. Therefore, we're going to try no excuse absentee. But many states do have that. But we've got to get it so that people can vote even when they're facing all of this suppression, especially in Republican states. That just means we have to redouble our efforts and find innovative ways to get people to do what will get them a ballot so that they can vote. And then if we vote out the people who are doing the suppression, then we've got to hold accountable the people that won to make sure they get rid of the suppression.
Amen. Lisa in Puyallup, Washington, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Lisa? No, Lisa. Okay, let's try Steve in Topanga, California. Steve, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. My question is to the congressman. You pass all these bills, progressive forms of bills, and they just sit in Mitch McConnell's desk. And it seems to me nothing's going to pass. The only way we're going to get anywhere is through the election. So why doesn't the Congress, the House, focus, and the Democrats focus on just getting out the vote? I mean, that is really productive. It seems just passing bills to the House to have only go to the Senate and die, nothing's going to happen. So why even do anything? It's just refocus, throw in the towel on passing bills, and just get the voter out. And you guys just spread out and back all the other candidates out there, local and national, and all that kind of thing. I think that you're wasting your time by doing these bills.
Let's get a response.
Yeah, Steve, I mean, I think we're doing both. One, we are doing everything to get the vote out, and we're working with our local parties. We're working with candidates. We're working with folks to make sure that that's happening. But also, sometimes by passing legislation, you show people the contrast between the parties and what they could have and what they're not getting right now because of Republican obstructionism. So whether it be things like equality for the LGBT community, ending police violence for folks that have all too long been systematically treated with discrimination, no matter what bills we pass, we're helping set the case for, look, this is the alternative, what you get, why it matters to come out to vote. And so I think you can do both quite easily, and we need to do both.
Bill in Union Pier, Michigan, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Congressman, I wanted to ask if there's a way of, in terms of accountability for the money that Trump and his family have taken from the pockets of the American taxpayer to fund their personal travel and leisure and got in the guise of representing this country. The fuel bill.
Bill, you're talking about yesterday, our conversation about Donald Trump Jr., $77,000 Secret Service bill so that he could go shoot an endangered species in some city in the on the west of India.
Yes, a drop in the bucket. I would think the fuel bill alone travel between Mar-a-Lago and the White House has to be upwards in millions of dollars. My question is there accountability in Washington? Is there a bookkeeper jotting all these expenses down? And why can that not be revealed to the American public?
Great question.
Sure. Well, first of all, I mean, some of it is just protection for the person who is the president and their family. But usually it's not abused at nearly the level that Donald Trump has. So, yes, even the media are keeping track, and you see running totals of how much the president spent. I think the biggest abuse that really needs to have far more public scrutiny is when the money is being spent at places like Mar-a-Lago or other facilities that the president owns, because that becomes what I think and many think is a violation of the Emoluments Clause, again, that no other president we've had to worry about, but this president thinks he's above the law all too often. So that is a way you could have, I think, some accountability. But, right now, I'll be honest, we're working remotely. We're dealing with COVID. We're dealing with systemic racism and police violence, trying to get that done by the end of the month. There are a lot of competing issues to just kind of looking at what they've done. The abuse, I believe, again, is making money go to their private entities, and that's where we should keep the focus on these dollars.
Peter in Lombard, Illinois. We have a little less than a minute to the break. Peter, you got a quick question, please?
Yes, I do. I'm from Chicago area, and I was driving back from Atlanta on Sunday, and I heard a commercial in northern Georgia by a Republican female candidate that referred to Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats' economic plan as a blue state bailout. And I know this is actually backwards with the red state, blue state situation. I was just wondering if you could explain, if there's anybody listening down there that's confused about that, if you could explain the blue state providing funds.
Great. He burned through the whole 45 seconds. Yep. I'm sorry. Congressman, we'll let you address that when we come back from the break here in about 5 minutes.
No worries.
It is 45 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. We're talking to Congressman Mark Pocan for the hour. It is been Days with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program, our national town hall meeting.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
with the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Congressman Mark Pocan. Pocan.house.gov, Rep. Mark Pocan on Twitter. And welcome back. Richard in Pasadena, California, listening on KPFK. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, Mark, last week a lady, Karen caller, was afraid, saying she's afraid of what Trump might do between now and January 20th. And so I'm saying, yeah, let's get a referendum vote and get this nation away from Trump before November. But anyhow, the other thing is, my question to you is, do you know about what James Madison said about this militarization with the police? It was all about what we've become today is exactly what he was arguing against.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that we've had votes going back since I've been in Congress, and there likely was before that, to try to stop this practice of having us just give military equipment that we're not using anymore to police stations because it doesn't provide any of the training, and you really don't need military equipment in many cases for local police departments. So I think that is a part of the bill that we're putting forward as the Democrats. But also, I think look at a lot of other issues. Mental health is, I think, a classic example. I was the ranking Democrat on the Corrections Committee in the Wisconsin legislature when Scott Walker, before he was governor, was the chair of that committee. And I can tell you all too often, how we've dealt with so many of these criminal justice issues around mental illness that it's become incarceration rather than health care for dealing with mental illness. And what would make more sense than to be redirecting those efforts to actually dealing with people who are mentally ill, with people who are medical professionals as opposed to police officers. And there's a lot of things like that I think we can reimagine how these relationships happen and who is the best person to provide some of the services. So I agree with you completely. The militarization of police officers doesn't make any sense. But I also think there's really an opportunity to use this to lift how we provide the services we provide and find the best people to do them. And it may not be who's currently providing those services.
Lisa in Puyallup, Washington, want to try it again?
Yes, I want to know why the Senate, after 150 years, is still refusing the anti-lynching bill by Emmett Till. What do we need to do to get Rand Paul to lift his finger and sign it and get him off of some language about abrasions around the neck?
Bingo.
Yeah, and I think some of that may just be excuses, right? I think that there is fundamentally still they're appealing to the now Republican Party of Donald Trump, and that Republican Party of Donald Trump, racism is alive and well. And because of that, that's the real reason the bill's not moving forward. They can say it's for this reason or that, but by Senate rules, individual senators have a lot of power if you don't have 60 members who can really try to move something forward in a stronger way. So, this isn't just Rand Paul and a question about abrasions around neck. This is about a Republican Party that is so intertwined with the racist movement within the United States that they won't stand out or step away from it. And that's our real problem.
They're using this. We just have 15 seconds. They're using this to bring in the white racist vote. How much longer do you think that's going to hold?
Yeah, I think that's a shrinking number every single day, and especially when you see all the young people at the protests, it's going to be shrinking every year in the future.
Yeah, and a fine thing it is. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. It's Middays with Mark, our Wednesday first hour national town hall meeting with the guy who's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. We'll be right back. Hey, Thom Hartmann here. I have a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream, and Ralph Nader wrote the foreword. It's available for pre-order wherever you find fine books. So for our Thom Hartmann Insider videotape that is over, or videotape, YouTube, whatever you want to call it, private video that's available over at ThomHartmann.com. I'm talking this week about Donald Trump just completely giving in to Erdogan of Turkey, the president of Turkey, the dictator of Turkey now. And this theory that Jared Kushner okayed the killing, at least the capture, perhaps the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and to Mohammed bin Salman, and that Erdogan has the tape of it, and that when he called up Donald Trump a couple weeks ago and said, I want you to pull out of Syria and give me those Kurds so I can kill them and take that land, that he did it because Erdogan threatened him. And then Erdogan comes to the United States, a week or two later and gets a whole state dinner thing. Check it all out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. I think you'll find it fascinating. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls. Congressman, we had a call just before we hit the break there. You want to respond to that?
Refresh me with a question. I apologize.
Well, me too. I have since spaced exactly what that question was, so maybe it'll pop back into my head, and I'll ask you about it. I'm sorry,
right,
so much is happening. I just read a live read here and all this other kind of stuff. My apologies. John in Tampa, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Congressman, how you doing? I got a feeling Congress is going to let the stimulus package die on the vine. I'm wondering why they're not just forcing it through, because there's 40 million people out there that are really, really hungry and haven't had money since April. And basically, they're given a lot of money has gone to a lot of stores, a lot of businesses. But, Martin Luther King said, what good does it do to be able to eat at the lunch counter if you can't buy a hamburger? So I'm wondering why they don't really push that through and put pressure on, because I believe a lot of the frustration and anger that came out over the last couple of weeks are because some of the looting. People are dying. You know what I mean? They're hungry.
John, the good news is the pressure is working. Most recently, I've heard that before they're not really sitting down to talk specifics, but suddenly they're maybe up to $1 trillion now for a relief package. They're talking numbers rather than what's in it. But that's progress because they're getting pressure from their constituents. So, it's important because that money, by the end of July, you will run out of that surge support that we put for unemployment. We did extend the weeks for unemployment. So many folks in that case are taken care of. But if you're a sole proprietor or independent contractor, it's a lot tougher. We did create the pandemic unemployment insurance, but many states haven't moved that like they should. There's a lot of people who are hurting. You're very accurate on that, John. And what we need to do is get another bill out, and the pressure will continue building, and people need to call their senators and put that pressure on them.
David in Columbus, Ohio, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. I'm kind of frustrated with the Democratic Party because they won't get back in touch with me on my calls or my emails. And I wanted to find out about policies. The policies of the Democratic Party, and if it is similar to the policies of the progressive parts of the Democratic Party. And why won't they make a strong commitment, especially on these letters that they keep getting? There's no commitment in each letter asking for money. They ask plenty of money, but they don't put down what they stand for. Thank you.
Yeah, so David, I can't speak directly to, I don't know who you're reaching out to as the party, and generally, the party will have a platform that comes out of its convention that may be some of those principles. So maybe that's why you're not getting a response. But just don't give money to people who send you a letter or send you an email if they don't tell you what they stand for. If you don't, you can't get a response on it, then fine. Then they've wasted that effort. Instead, support those who support your values. But, parties are different than elected officials. It's important what elected official will say they're going to do and what they say they're going to vote on, because they actually have a vote. A party doesn't. So, let's make sure we have a good platform going into November. But more importantly, let's make sure the people we elect stand for the right things. And if you're not hearing it, don't support those folks.
The question we both spaced on was a guy called and said he heard an ad in North Georgia for a local congressional candidate who was opposing Nancy Pelosi's blue state bailout, and he wanted you to push back on that language.
Yeah, and the gentleman was from Illinois, and I think especially Illinois seems to be the state that everyone points to, saying don't bail out states. So they're going to point out a state or two that may have had some financial problems, and they're going to claim that money that's going to providing services for people with COVID-19, which are being right now done by state and local governments, instead is going to go to bail out Illinois. And of course, because of that, therefore, don't support any other state. It's a illogical argument, but for some of Trump's base, it seems to work. I think it doesn't work overall. I've seen polling to that effect. So, let them run the ads. But the reality is, our state and local governments are the ones right now providing most of the services, especially that we're asking from the federal government, and they do need resources to do that.
Jordan, we have 45 seconds. Can you ask your question very, very quickly, please?
I can.
Jordan in Albuquerque.
So my question, yes, I can. Hello? My question for the congressman is, do you believe voting is a tangible example of white privilege? Because as an African American, I can't think of anything we have done that we should not have the same rights to voting. And have you ever decided to try to encourage your colleagues to present voting as a white privilege issue, and that we need to include everybody to do this?
Jordan, let's get his answer. Thank you.
Yeah, Jordan, I'll tell you, I think what's interesting is, we still refer to the right to vote. And thanks to Bush v. Gore, it's proven there is not an actual right to vote in the Constitution. We talk about discrimination in voting. That's why I've had a constitutional amendment to try to make it a right. And I hear the music. But, Tom, thanks again for the week. We enjoyed so much.
Sure. Thank you, Congressman, for being with us. It's always great talking with you. Congressman Mark Pocan with the state of Wisconsin, 2nd District of Wisconsin, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Stick around. We'll be right back. It's going to get interesting.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
One.
We say fight back!
So we've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who support our program, and there's a really troubling concatenation of events events that are happening in the United States right now. We created these concentration camps for refugees seeking asylum. This was Stephen Miller's big project. And we've got concentration camps for children, concentration camps for male adults, concentration camps for female adults. And now we've got this virus sweeping through the United States, and people are starting to die in these concentration camps, which has provoked ICE or whoever's running them to deport hundreds of the children back to the countries that they came from without their parents, which is mind-boggling, and in many cases carrying disease. This is serious stuff, and we need to be talking about it. The new video is over at thomhartmann.com. It is the final day, the last chance to have your contribution to Free Speech TV doubled by Mike in San Francisco, up to $50,000. So call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution, make your voice heard. Here's how I want to help. With a $20 gift, you get a Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the I'm Voting Are You car magnet, your choice. With the $50 gift, you have your choice between the Just Effing Vote tote bag or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, and uniquely, the only thing with the $75 gift is the Thom Hartmann Program mug which is really cool. The folks at Free Speech TV designed this, and it's they just said, hey, can you send us a picture? We sent a picture, and look at that. With a $100 gift, you can get 2 Free Speech TV face masks, which are really nice face masks that say Free Speech TV on them. With a $120 gift, you have your choice. There's a whole bunch of different options. There is the social distancing kit, which is the 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the Free Speech TV branded hand sanitizer. There is the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. You take your pick of one of these things with a $120 gift. There is the Ask Me About Free Speech TV t-shirt. There is my book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. That book has been out for a few months. It's my newest book that you could purchase right now in the stores. And then there's 4 great books. You take your choice, one of them, if you would like one of those. These are all with a $120 gift. 4 great books on race and race relations in the United States. The new Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, which is this absolutely brilliant look at policing in our prison system, which is particularly, I think, relevant in many ways right now. White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo is a brilliant read. Dear White America by Tim Wise and Uprooting Racism by Paul Kivel. Those 2 books I've not read, I can't speak to, but they come highly recommended to me by the folks at Free Speech TV who worked up this list. And in fact, I'm putting them on my list to read when I'm done writing this book right now in healthcare, which is, I'm just up to here with that. But anyhow, those are your choices, or special bonus for a $120 gift. My newest book, which won't be out for another month or so, but you'll be one of the very first people to get an autographed copy of The Hidden History of Monopoly, How Big Business Stole the American Dream, or Destroyed the American Dream, I think is the word in the title. And, so your choice of one of any of those things with a $120 gift, with a $240 gift to join me for a private meet and greet. It's a private conversation, just a few of us, to discuss whatever's on your mind. If you want to ask, anything about anything that I know about my life, about any way I might be helpful to you in any way, by giving you information during that Zoom meeting, $240 gift, and we've had some fascinating conversations. With a $360 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann University box, 2 Free Speech TV face masks, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, the Just Effing Vote tote bag, the I'm Voting Are You car magnet, the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. And with a $1,000 gift, you can get in line to come visit us here in Portland the next time that when we start doing our show from the studio. I have a feeling it's going to be probably well into the winter, but hey, let's plan in advance. So those are the options, and of course you're also welcome to give absolutely any amount that you're comfortable with. And today, last day, today only now, your gift will be doubled by Mike in San Francisco up to $50,000. So please call now. Make your contribution to Free Speech TV. This network needs you. Our program needs you. Perhaps most importantly, the fate and future of our republic, of democracy itself, of America's standing around the world needs you. So not to lay too much on you, too much responsibility, but this is really a big deal. I wouldn't be here doing this every day if I didn't think it was really important. And I know most of the people working with me would not be doing this if they didn't think it was important. There's other things that people can be doing. And we've got some really talented people. There's some great and talented people at Free Speech TV. We need your help. We'll produce the programming. Free Speech TV will keep the network going, keep the electrons flowing, keep them bouncing off those satellites and on the cable systems and on the internets and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that we need from you, the only help that we need from you is twofold. Number one, tell everybody you know about Free Speech TV so that we can expand our viewership base and thus expand our potential donor base. And number two, if you can afford to right now, call 877-378-8669. Tell them you're watching, tell them what you're watching, and tell them which premium you'd like, and make your contribution to Free Speech TV. It's such a vital time. I realize that we're all getting all kinds of appeals from politicians and everybody else that it's a time of crisis for this country. It is for Free Speech TV, too. Please call now and help out. Thank you so much.
Convince the editors, when no other publication that mattered in the East cared, that the threat of such land transfer was an existential one. This Land by Christopher Ketchum.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, the headline over at Raw Story, an article by Brad Reed, reads, "Neighbors stunned as cop takes down black Amazon driver for parking the wrong way." He parked on the wrong side of the street with his car facing the wrong direction. A neighborhood in Warren, Michigan expressed shock this week when local police took down a black Amazon driver for merely parking the wrong way on their street. Fox 2 Detroit reports that witnesses say the Amazon driver was tackled by a police officer, and they go through the whole thing. He called in help. He ended up with 3 cops sitting on him. Pretty strange stuff. What do we do? This defund the police is basically a call to do the same thing that the Republican Party has been talking about doing with Obamacare for quite some time, which is repeal and replace. Let's get to gender and racial equality in our police departments to reflect the communities. Let's have helpers for the police. There's a lot of things that cops are called on to do that really don't require cops. They require things like mental health professionals. Police can be effective can only be effective when they're considered legitimate by their communities. Therefore, frankly, I think they should live in their communities where they work, and I think that they should have malpractice insurance. On the line with us is Julio Rivera, our old buddy, the editorial director at Reactionary Times, columnist with Newsmax, American Thinker, and townhall.com. ReactionaryTimes.com is his website, and his Twitter handle is YEAH. Oh, yeah, it's Julio. Julio, welcome back. So what do you think about repeal and replace for dealing with our police problems?
Well, the last thing we need to do right now in a time of chaos and uprising across the country is to think about defunding the police. I will say this, though. There is an issue that needs to be addressed, and I think that's the police unions. The police unions are far too strong, and they're offering protection to bad police officers. The police officer in the case of George Floyd, he had 18 violations. I don't understand how you could be a police officer with 18 violations and still have your job. So I think it's the strength of the police unions. I think police, just like any other job, you should get job security and promoted and get raises and all that kind of stuff based on merit. And I think that's across the board. I think that, we can talk about and have the same conversation in regards to the teachers' unions. I think there's too many bad teachers out there, just like there's too many bad police officers. Who's educating the people in these high crime areas? We can make that argument as well, can't we, Tom?
Well, teachers aren't carrying guns to begin with, number one. And number two, the teachers' unions have been really, really effective at advocating for children. More often than not, what you find are teachers' unions are fighting for the kids in their schools as much as they are their teachers. But I'd rather not have this be a debate. You're welcome to come on and debate teachers' unions with me if you want. But right now, I think the issue we need to be talking about is the police. And I realize you don't like unions as a conservative. I do like unions as a liberal. But I actually agree with you. These police unions are running as protection rackets. In some cases, they're not even incorporated as actual unions, although in most cases, apparently they are. And, I think, frankly, they're out of control. But I think that's a small reflection of a much larger problem, which is our system of policing itself. And at the very least, what is wrong with saying that police must, 94% of the cops, if my recollection is correct, it's over 90%, whatever the number is, of the Minneapolis cops don't live in Minneapolis. What's wrong with this picture? People should go home to the neighborhoods that they police. They should know the people that they're policing. Number one. Number two, they should reflect their community in regard, with regard to race at the very least, and income broadly, to the extent that that's possible. You're probably not going to get a lot of millionaires wanting to become cops. But you get my point. And number three, what about gender equality? 51% of our population is female. It's got to be about 3% of our cops. Your thoughts, Julio?
Well, the one thing is being a cop, being a police officer is an opt-in proposition. So you can't necessarily control the demographics by race and by gender in that way.
You can do recruiting.
I totally agree with you that we should have police officers that are forced to live in the neighborhoods that they police. I think that would have a great effect on minimizing police brutality, because then they would know more or less the lay of the land. They would know a lot of the people that they may potentially be called on to have to deal with. It may, break down the walls of, I think a lot of the tension that surfaces when the police first encounter a situation if they're familiar with the people that they're dealing with. I strongly agree with you on that one, Tom.
Yeah, fascinating. So another piece of this. I went through the list really quickly at the top of the hour. I saw a police chief on CNN, and my apologies, I don't remember his name or where he was from, but this was about 3 days ago. And the straight up interview. It wasn't some kind of a trash cops or trash Trump or whatever interview. And the interviewer asked this police chief, what's one of the biggest problems that you have as a police officer, or that your police officers have? And he said that about 80% of the calls that we get do not require the immediate use of force or the use of force, and probably at least 50% of the calls that we get probably never would require the use of force. And so for a lot of these calls that are being handed off to us by 9/11, we're doing things that other people should be doing instead of having guys with guns doing them. You've got people who are having mental health crises. You've got people who are having domestic disputes that are not, where somebody's got a gun, or not violence. You've got, dogs running amok. You've got Amazon drivers parking the wrong way on the street. I mean, God only knows what it is, bird watchers in the park. And he was suggesting that there should be, 911 right now can only call cops and ambulances and fire trucks. They should be able to call a few other things too. And those should be integrated into the communication systems with the police and fire departments. What do you think?
I, again, fully agree. But in cases of domestic violence, we don't always get an accurate story of what's actually going on. So the police, if anything else, to act as a diffuser of tensions that may eventually become violent. I mean, how many violent women become victims of violent crime as a result of domestic abuse? So I think that the police still should, more or less, that should still fall under their jurisdiction. But you're right. I mean, people that are having drug overdoses or people who are suicidal, there should be more resources. But this blanket movement of, let's defund the police, let's remove, police forces and replace it with community-based alternatives. I mean, that sounds like a fairy tale to me, Tom. At the end of the day, these communities, especially a lot of the urban communities where drugs and gangs and violence is rampant. I mean, how are you going to remove the police and not have the inner cities where...
I don't think anybody is talking about removing them, Julio. What people are talking about is repeal and replace, basically. It's if the police force is so corrupt that you get 100 cops standing on the street giving a standing ovation to a guy who just got indicted for murder or for police violence, you've got a corrupt police department. You really need to just, start over.
There is corruption in some police departments, and I think the Department of Justice should step up.
I think it's the norm.
A full national audit of police officers.
Well, this is what Obama called for. He issued 59 proposals, and Trump set it all aside and said, we're not going to do any of that.
No, Trump, you could read about it in Reactionary Times. Trump is looking to install some major reforms right now to policing, and he's asking the help of Congress to go ahead and do so. So, no, that's not accurate, Tom.
Okay, well, I'll look forward to those. Julio Rivera, reactionarytimes.com is the website. Oh, yeah, it's Julio is the Twitter handle. Julio, it's interesting. It's nice talking with you, and we're not just screaming at each other. Thank you so much for dropping by. Although screaming at each other is entertaining, too. Thanks, Julio.
Yes, exactly. Next time.
You betcha. Have a great day. We'll be back. It's 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Interesting. I think a consensus is emerging that racist and violent policing has seen its day. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Liz in Los Angeles. Hey, Liz, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I want to talk about the terminology that the Democrats use. They're too honest, and they need to do what the Republicans are doing. Change the terminology. When we give tax breaks and subsidies to the wealthy, don't call it that. You call it welfare for the rich, because that's what it is. And welfare has such a demeaning tone to it now, because of what the Republicans have done. I worked in welfare when I first went to work for the county of L.A., and yes, I did make a lot of fraud referrals, but there were also a lot of women who needed that money because they were abandoned by their husbands and they didn't pay child support, and so you change the terminology to welfare for the rich, over protection for the rich, whatever the current terminology should be. You
I think I get your point, Liz, and on the level of messaging, I completely agree with it. I think one of the biggest problems that we have is that because the Supreme Court in 1976 and 78 made it legal for first billionaires and then secondly for corporations, respectively, to own politicians or even political parties, calling that free speech, First Amendment protected free speech, something that had never before been a doctrine in the United States and to this day is not a doctrine in any other major democratic republic in the world. Because of that, when it comes time to write bills, like, for example, the legislation that we've seen, the $3 trillion worth of support, subsidies, and whatnot to help people as a result of the COVID recession, that some 80% of the benefits went to a very small number of very wealthy corporations and billionaires. They got most of the benefit from the coronavirus bailout. Why? Because those laws were written by or modified by lobbyists for the industries and the very billionaires, including one special provision that specifically helped out the Trump family. The real estate guys. We've got to get money out of politics, Liz.
Yeah, we need to change the terminology. Instead of calling them just Mitch for the rich or Moscow Mitch, call them Mitch bought and sold by Corporation X, Y, and Z, and you can list the names. I think it would take a little more research, but, next to each of these people running, we should list who they're bought and sold by.
Yeah. Well, I actually wrote a book called Rebooting the American Dream, and one of the chapters in it is called Make Them Wear NASCAR Patches, where I was saying, okay, if we're going to have bought and paid for members of the House and Senate, require them to wear the logos of the companies that own them on their clothes, and just like the NASCAR drivers do. I mean, I think we can. Go ahead.
That's a very good idea. I think it should be done.
Or at the very least, to be serious, I don't think you're going to get them to wear NASCAR patches, but to be serious, they should be required to list them on the homepage of their congressional website. It's every member of Congress has a website. Liz, thank you for the call. In the House, they're name.house.gov. In the Senate, it's name.senate.gov. So it'd be sanders.senate.gov, pocan.house.gov. On that homepage, there should be a required box which lists their top 20 donors, be they billionaire individuals or be they corporations. Now, they'd probably figure out a way to game that system too, but we got to get some transparency here. We'll be right back.
Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Hey, we have a special new video up for supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com. And it's about how FDR in 1944, in fact, January 44, in his
State of the Union address, talked about how important it was to add rights to the Bill of Rights. The original Bill of Rights was all political rights. He said it's time to enshrine economic rights in our Constitution. I would add, like most of the governments of Europe have done. And this includes the right to housing, the right to food, the right to a good job that pays well, the right to an education, including a college education, and the right to health care. It is pretty powerful stuff. And frankly, I think that what this coronavirus crisis is proving is that we are all in this together, and that Reagan's thing about government is never going to help you was just a load of crap. And so you can check it out over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. So in Georgia, we have now seen the enemy, and not to totally revisit Pogo, the enemy is us, but the enemy is clearly the Republican Party. Yesterday, we saw the Republican Party's voter suppression strategy on full display as black areas in Georgia, and pretty much exclusively African-American neighborhoods in Georgia, were absolutely deprived of enough voting machines, enough polling places, that their citizens could vote in a reasonable period of time. And now what I'm hearing as I'm watching the news, I heard this morning on one of the networks. I read it in a story in the Washington Post. You've got the Republican officials in Georgia saying, oh, well, that was the fault of the local election people. They just didn't know how to run the machine. Which, frankly, I think is GOP/racist code for those black people in those largely black precincts who are volunteering to help out. Or they're just not smart enough to run the machines, or words to that effect. I mean, that seems to me like the subtext. That's the only excuse they're making. I read through this Washington Post piece. It's titled "In Georgia, Primary Day Snarled by Long Lines, Problems with Voting Machines, a Potential Preview of November." By Amy Gardner. It starts out, problems were concentrated in Atlanta and surrounding counties. Now, keep in mind, this is the number one strategy the Republican Party uses for voter suppression. Force people to stand in line for a long time. Works even better during a pandemic. But is there any mention of that in this article? Okay, back to the article. Problems were concentrated in Atlanta and surrounding counties, where voters described standing in line for hours with election officials processing paper ballots by hand painfully slowly because they could not get new touchscreen machines to work or they had not been delivered on time. The chaos in Georgia offered another example of election troubles. This isn't a trouble. This is exactly what Brian Kemp wanted. Anyhow, back to this. The chaos in Georgia offered another example of election troubles as states adjust their procedures in response to the pandemic. The problems could foreshadow significant challenges in November at a time of deepening partisanship around voting, with President Trump and his GOP allies inaccurately attacking mail voting as prone to fraud. And then it goes on. People are calling for investigations. People are complaining about standing in line for so long. A confluence of circumstances hit Georgia voters Tuesday. Many new poll workers brought on to replace those who had bowed out because of fears of the virus were unfamiliar with the new ballot marking devices that were deployed statewide for the first time, replacing a paperless electronic voting system that a federal judge had declared insecure. Well, if it's the fault of the local officials, why is this not happening in the white communities? Why is it that report after report after report is coming in from people saying, hey, I live in Roswell. I live in Marietta. I live in, fill in the blank, white communities in Georgia. No problem. I lived in Georgia for 13 years. I believe it was 13, either 11 or 13 years. Louise and I lived there with, we raised our kids there. They all went to Georgia schools. I mean, we started and built and sold off 2 different businesses during the years that we lived in Georgia, a travel business and an advertising business. And when we lived in Marietta, it was a largely white, maybe 20% black or thereabouts, but a largely white town, Marietta, mostly. It certainly seemed that way to me. And, I don't have the actual numbers right in front of me. And then we moved out of it, but it was more middle class, right? Kind of right in the middle. And then we moved to Roswell, which is north of Marietta, which is used to be actually an independent little town, which is pretty much all white or largely white. And in both cases, I never had to wait more than 15 minutes to vote, ever. And I vote in every election. Never had to wait more than 15 minutes. And in every single one of those elections, you read the Atlanta Constitution Journal, you watch the local TV stations, and every single election, you saw these long, long lines in Atlanta, in black communities to vote. And why? Because the white racist power structure, the white, largely Republican racist power structure that controls at the statewide level, that controls Georgia, Brian Kemp being the most recent manifestation of that, doesn't want black people to vote. It's just that simple. This is voter suppression. And the media narrative needs to shift from, oh my God, we've got problems with voting machines, or we've got untrained or inexperienced voting, poll workers, which is clearly not the case. I mean, yes, of course, that's the case all over the place. But why is it that in white neighborhoods it takes 5 minutes to vote, in black neighborhoods it takes 6 hours to vote? This is not an accident. We need to stop behaving like it's an accident. We need to stop describing it as an accident. Oh, who could have imagined? This is the system that the Republicans want. This is what they're betting on this fall. This is why they are fighting voting by mail, even though voting by mail is the most secure and safe and consistent way to vote. We've had vote by mail here in Oregon for over 20 years. No so-called voting fraud. None of it. And we have one of the highest, if not the highest, voter participation in the entire country because it's so easy. It's so straightforward. And yes, they're still comparing your signature. There's still biometric security. Anyhow, pick up your calls after the break. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
What's it going to take to stop Republicans from maintaining structural racism in our voting? By the way, you can see my op-ed about this over at buzzflash.com and commondreams.org.
This
It is the final day, the last day, the last chance to have your contribution to Free Speech TV doubled by Mike in San Francisco, up to $50,000. So call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution, make your voice heard. Here's how I want to help. With a $20 gift, you get a Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the I'm Voting Are You car magnet, your choice. With a $50 gift, you have your choice between the Just Effing Vote tote bag or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, and uniquely, the only thing with the $75 gift is the Thom Hartmann Program mug, which is really cool. The folks at Free Speech TV designed this, and it's they just said, hey, can you send us a picture? We sent a picture, and look at that. With a $100 gift, you can get 2 Free Speech TV face masks, which are really nice face masks that say Free Speech TV on them. With a $120 gift, you have your choice. There's a whole bunch of different options. There is the social distancing kit, which is the 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the Free Speech TV branded hand sanitizer. There is the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. You take your pick of one of these things with a $120 gift. There is the Ask Me About Free Speech TV t-shirt. There is my book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. That book has been out for a few months. It's my newest book that you could purchase right now in the stores. And then there's 4 great books. You take your choice, one of them, if you would like one of those. These are all with a $120 gift. 4 great books on race and race relations in the United States. The new Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, which is this absolutely brilliant look at policing in our prison system, which is particularly, I think, relevant in many ways right now. White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo is a brilliant read. Dear White America by Tim Wise and Uprooting Racism by Paul Kivel. Those two books I've not read, I can't speak to, but they come highly recommended to me by the folks at Free Speech TV who worked up this list. And in fact, I'm putting them on my list to read when I'm done writing this book right now on healthcare, which is, I'm just up to here with that. But anyhow, those are your choices, or special bonus for a $120 gift. My newest book, which won't be out for another month or so, but you'll be one of the very first people to get an autographed copy of The Hidden History of Monopoly, How Big Business Stole the American Dream, or Destroyed the American Dream, I think is the word in the title. And, so your choice of one of any of those things with a $120 gift, with a $240 gift to join me for a private meet and greet. It's a private conversation, just a few of us, to discuss whatever's on your mind. If you want to ask, anything about anything that I know about my life, about any way I might be helpful to you in any way, by giving you information during that Zoom meeting, $240 gift, and had some fascinating conversations. With a $360 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann University box, 2 Free Speech TV face masks, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, the Just Effing Vote tote bag, the I'm Voting Are You car magnet, the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. And with a $1,000 gift, you can get in line to come visit us here in Portland the next time that when we start doing our show from the studio. I have a feeling it's going to be probably well into the winter, but hey, let's plan in advance. So those are the options, and of course you're also welcome to give absolutely any amount that you're comfortable with. And today, last day, today only now, your gift will be doubled by Mike in San Francisco up to $50,000. So please call now. Make your contribution to Free Speech TV. This network needs you. Our program needs you. Perhaps most importantly, the fate and future of our republic, of democracy itself, of America's standing around the world needs you. So not to lay too much on you, too much responsibility, but this is really a big deal. I wouldn't be here doing this every day if I didn't think it was really important. And I know most of the people working with me would not be doing this if they didn't think it was important. There's other things that people can be doing. And we've got some really talented people. There's some great and talented people at Free Speech TV. We need your help. We'll produce the programming. Free Speech TV will keep the network going, keep the electrons flowing, keep them bouncing off those satellites and on the cable systems and on the internets and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that we need from you, the only help that we need from you is twofold. Number one, tell everybody you know about Free Speech TV so that we can expand our viewership base and thus expand our potential donor base. And number two, if you can afford to right now, call 877-378-8669. Tell them you're watching, tell them what you're watching, and tell them which premium you'd like, and make your contribution to Free Speech TV. It's such a vital time. I realize that we're all getting all kinds of appeals from politicians and everybody else that it's a time of crisis for this country. It is for Free Speech TV too. Please call now and help out. Thank you so much. Citizens. Bill Freese drops by. He's the science policy analyst with the Center for Food Safety on the newly finalized federal regulations on GMOs. And Beyond Nuclear's Paul Gunter also drops by on how America is unprepared for a nuclear accident during this pandemic. Find the Science Revolution wherever you get great podcasts. So it turns out back in November, the spy agencies in the United States were notifying the Trump administration that something's going on in China. Looks like another SARS outbreak. Maybe we should get ready for this. It was ignored. I've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for the supporters of our program that basically goes through the whole timeline, all the way from, actually going back to 2018 when Trump disbanded 3 different anti-pandemic agencies in the Department of Homeland Security, the National Security Council, and the executive branch. Just closed them down, fired the people. That was the end of that. how he ignored the intelligence in November, he ignored the intelligence in December, he ignored the epidemic now coming into the United States in January, he ignored it in February, just going the blow-by-blow timeline. And I think it's really worth having it all in one place, a good recap, a good summary of this that you can refer to and you can share with your friends. It's all over at thomhartmann.com. You can check it out. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A couple of interesting things here. I just got an email from Eric Trump, from Don Jr. Where have you been? I need your help. We are making a card to celebrate our father's birthday on June 14th, and our goal is to get 2 million signatures from patriots like you across the country. And it's of course, it's a pitch for money. You click on it and you make a donation. But number one, June 14th is Trump's birthday, and all across the country, groups are organizing, more or less, to post on his Twitter feed to him, at Real Donald Trump, to tweet to him pictures of President Obama. Best president in our lifetime. Let's tweet pictures of President Obama. But number two, I've been getting these emails, as you know, since 2015. And, when I gave $5 to the Trump campaign, I did this with a bunch of campaigns because I wanted to get on the mailing list, and I'm still on Trump's mailing list. And in fact, there's a couple of ways you can get on his mailing list without even giving him $5. And I encourage you to do it just to see the kind of stuff these guys are sending out, to get a sense of what they're talking about. I got an email a couple of days ago that said I was sitting down, it was like from Brad Parscale, I think, or somebody like that in the campaign. He says, I was sitting down with President Trump, and he noticed that your name is not on the list. And then I got another one, maybe a week ago that said, President Trump specifically told me he would like to have dinner with you and your significant other, your spouse. Please chip in a donation to join the raffle, essentially, for these meals with Trump. By the way, Judd Legum outed some months ago the fact that nobody ever actually wins those contests. But they must really think that they're not even, they must not think. I was going to say they must think that the average person who's getting these emails is really stupid. But the fact of the matter is they've been doing them like this for 3.5 years. It must be that it works. It worked. This very intimate, President Trump noticed your name wasn't on the list this week. I get at least one a week of those kind of things. You were one of our greatest supporters, Fred, and now, it's absolutely bizarre and absolutely fascinating. I'm not quite sure what to make of it. But anyway, so there's a lot going on. Let's pick up some phone calls here. Jim in Tower, Minnesota. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'm calling because I just have some concerns of a Trump speech I heard early in the year when he was in Europe. I think it was in the Netherlands, where he said he was going to get back at Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats for impeaching him. He was going to eliminate Social Security. And I was before in May, and I'm kind of concerned.
Yeah, he's not going to. Every Republican president since Eisenhower has taken a run at this. The most successful was Reagan. He made Social Security benefits taxable. They didn't used to be. And he raised the Social Security retirement age from 65 to 67. And it didn't phase in until just the last couple of years. And he doubled the Social Security tax, which was arguably necessary. But that was, George W. Bush in 1979 campaigned, or I guess it was 78, the 78 election. He ran for Congress from Texas for the House of Representatives, the U.S. House, and he lost because his single campaign shtick was privatizing Social Security. In 2005, when he won re-election, he came right out and he said, I've got political capital from winning re-election. I'm going to use it to privatize Social Security. And I believe he spoke in 24 different cities. He traveled all around the United States giving speeches about how important and how urgent it is to privatize Social Security right now, turn it all over to Jamie Dimon and the banksters. And as the more often he spoke about it, the lower his favorability ratings went. So, Jim, I'm really not worried about that. There's a very easy fix for the small problems that Social Security is facing right now, And that is simply to require billionaires and millionaires and multimillionaires to pay the exact same percentage of their income into the Social Security Trust Fund as you and I do, as people who make under $130,000 a year do. It's a very simple, very straightforward. And that's it. It's called lifting the cap. But I wouldn't worry. He's not going to do it. Michael in Crystal Lake, Illinois. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind?
Yes, thank you so much for taking my call. I just have an idea that might help the police brutality situation with the unions, and that is to bring the unions in even closer and have them be at least partially liable for any monetary settlements that may be awarded to somebody who was abused.
Yeah, I suggested this a couple days ago, that individual police and or the police unions should be the ones who pay. I mean, you look at some of these city budgets and you see that, I think it was over $100 million New York City paid out last year in settlements to people who sued because the police abused them. The numbers are just mind-boggling. And if individual cops had to carry liability insurance the same way the doctors do, they are the two professions that literally, professionally, they can take your life or they can protect your life. There's pretty much nobody else. I mean, I would add to doctors and nurses, but doctors and nurses and physicians' assistants and all that whole category of people, they all have to carry malpractice insurance. They have to carry liability insurance. Police officers should have to carry liability insurance. And if they can't get the insurance, they shouldn't be allowed to be police officers. And then you've got a national system that doesn't require government databases and government this and government that. Although I'm not opposed to that. I think we absolutely should have that. But insurance company, when there's money on the line, they're going to figure out who's a high risk and who's a low risk, and they're going to treat them accordingly. So, pretty straightforward stuff. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Hey, well, the right of all citizens to vote shall not be impeded nor denied. And I don't understand why that amendment has not been a hot topic, because we don't have the right to vote because they didn't want to give women the right to vote when they wrote up the Constitution, because women were technically citizens. But what's that?
Also, people of color, African Americans and other and Native
right, they were
Americans
citizens.
Yes.
They could be counted. They could be counted, but they had no rights at all. As a matter of fact, there was an expatriation bill in 1907. If a native-born or American woman who was a citizen married a citizen of another country, she automatically lost her citizenship. And the only way to get it back is if her husband first applied and became a naturalized citizen, then she had to go through a naturalization process as well.
But at that point in time, women still didn't have the vote. But in answer to your question, Bill, Democrats have been working since the 1970s to get this passed. I think it was in 73 when they passed the Motor Voter Act. And the Motor Voter Act, the preamble to it says the right to vote is a right held by all American citizens, or language to that effect. I may not be quoting it absolutely verbatim. And then that language is repeated in the body of the bill. So that is part of our law right now. The problem is that the Supreme Court has not recognized that. There's also 3 or 4 places in the Constitution where the phrase right to vote appears. And so, if the Supreme Court were to come out and say, yes, there is an absolute right to vote, then you'd have no problem. The problem is that in 2000, when George W. Bush lost Florida to Al Gore, and we found this out a full year later, the month after 9/11, when this consortium of newspapers, the Associated Press, the Washington Post, the New York Times, USA Today, Gannett, finally actually brought this giant truck with all the ballots from Florida up to New York, and they counted them. It took them a whole year, and they found that Al Gore actually won Florida. But in order to stop that count, you had the Brooks Brothers riot. You had a bunch of Republican members of Congress, particularly Tom DeLay, who took their staffs down to Florida. They pretended they were Floridians, pounded on the windows, said stop the vote, and then they sued in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court blocked the Supreme Court of Florida, which had said the entire state needs to be recounted. The U.S. Supreme Court blocked that, which is unheard of. It's a complete violation of the 10th Amendment, which says that rights not given to the federal government devolve to the states. A complete violation of the 10th Amendment. And that's why they said this doesn't apply to anything else. This is just to put George Bush in the White House. But that was, in that decision, Rehnquist literally said there is no constitutional right to vote for president. We got to fix it.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
The problem is it takes a constitutional amendment, and there have only been 27 of those passed since the beginning. There's been over 29,000 attempts to amend the Constitution. And welcome back. Fran in Seattle. Hey, Fran, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I've been hearing a lot about defunding the police over the last couple of days, and I wondered, it occurred to me this morning that defunding things is how Republicans take over and privatize them. Maybe I misunderstand the message of defunding the police. I think we should demilitarize, certainly, but I wonder if we run the risk of the right wing appropriating that message and using it as a wedge to kind of privatize the police in this country, which would be very dangerous because it makes them accountable to nobody.
Yeah. That's an interesting question, Fran, or an interesting take on it. I hadn't considered that, but I don't think that would be a problem because the police still have to be paid for by the city council and, or the town council or whatever it may be, or the county. And so I think you could argue, in fact, that they already operate as if they were privatized. They operate outside the realm of direct supervision by virtue of the power that their union has, and their power to do these the blue flu things. I mean, we heard from one of the members of the Minneapolis City Council that when she first proposed a couple of years ago, more heavily regulating the police in Minneapolis, that suddenly the cops in the part of town that she represented were taking an extra half hour or hour to respond to calls in that part of town. And she was getting complaints from people saying the police don't come when I call them. And it was, their way of punishing. So to a certain extent, it's already been privatized. I think the really more cogent argument against using the phrase defund the police, which, by the way, I've gotten 3 emails now from Donald Trump in the last 3 days, or from the White House in the last 3 days, suggesting that Democrats don't want you to have police. They want to defund the police. That's the bigger problem, is that the Republicans will use it. But what the hell? I mean, it's out there. It's done. It's already there. I think we need to embrace it and run with it, rather than being afraid, rather than tiptoeing around. Go all the way. Just like, for a long, long time, we were saying Medicare for all, and everybody was saying, oh, you can't say that. That's too radical. Well, still, eventually it doesn't become too radical. What do you think?
Yeah, this is tricky for me. I live in South Seattle, and we have a lot of crime down here because, gosh, there's just a lot of criminals that live in my neighborhood. And, we actually had an 8,000-person march over the weekend with nothing broken and no one hurt.
Yeah.
And I didn't see a lot of that on the news. But we do need police for certain things down here.
Of course, and we all do everywhere. I mean, we had our neighbor literally right across the street had their house broken into the other day and a bunch of electronics stolen, and they got a picture of the guy with their security camera, and it's circulating in the neighborhood, here, and would that the cops had caught him.
On the other hand, there's a house that's across the street from me where a few years ago there was a really nice family living there. We didn't talk to them that much, but then they were quiet. They worked on cars a lot. And all of a sudden one day there's a friggin' SWAT team in front of their house. Well, these people, as far as I know, had never caused any trouble to anybody at all. Why call it a SWAT team? That seems really, really excessive.
Yeah. And I lay a lot of that blame on Reagan's 1033 program and also on the change in police television shows that happened in the 1980s, which is a whole other discussion. Fran, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Thom Hartmann here. Did you know that the Second Amendment was written to protect the slave patrols in South Carolina and Georgia back in the day. It's in my new book, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment, available wherever you find great books. So we've got a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who support our program, and there's a really troubling concatenation of events events that are happening in the United States right now. We created these concentration camps for refugees seeking asylum. This was Stephen Miller's big project. And we've got concentration camps for children, concentration camps for male adults, concentration camps for female adults. And now we've got this virus sweeping through the United States, and people are starting to die in these concentration camps, which has provoked ICE or whoever's running them to deport hundreds of the children back to the countries that they came from without their parents, which is mind-boggling, and in many cases carrying disease. This is serious stuff, and we need to be talking about it. The new video is over at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Susan in Sarasota Springs, New York. Hey, Susan, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to get back to the topic that we were discussing regarding police reform. I think that what we should really do is, my idea, would be much better if they had mediators that were hired by the police department and were on the same shifts as the police. And when they would go to every call that was a domestic to de-escalate. Paid mediators to work with the police because the police aren't trained enough. If you have an MSW, you have a master's in psychology, you have someone on call there to go with the police that knows how to de-escalate, deal with mental illness, trained in that, not to be reactionary at all, and calm the situation down. I think that would be so much better because the police, they get called for a lot of things that are very small. Like even yesterday, a friend of mine in Saratoga at the dog park had two beagles that were barking in the morning in the dog park. Well, across the street from the dog park, a woman called 911, the cops on him because the dog was barking. Now, that's a waste of policeman's time. That's absolutely a waste.
But that's why I've been suggesting, that 9/11 have more resources to them than just fire, ambulance, and police, number one. But number two, Susan, isn't in a way what you're arguing, to shift the metaphor slightly, that if we discovered that a lot of doctors were refusing to wash their hands before they did surgery, which, by the way, was a big problem in the late 19th century, because they just didn't, they didn't take all this stuff seriously. They thought it was fake news that you had to wash your hands. And so people were getting horrible infections and dying from sepsis, that the solution is to hire a bunch of people to watch the doctors washing their hands. I would say the solution is to change the whole institution of doctoring so that only people who actually believe in science become doctors, and therefore you don't even have to tell them to wash their hands, they understand the science. Shouldn't we be reinventing policing so that the people who are in those police cars, the people who are walking the neighborhoods, the people who are coming to, whether it's domestic violence or walking the dog or a burglary, whatever, that they are not just properly trained? Because one of the things that we've seen is that this whole police sensitivity to race and gender issues has become a multi-billion-dollar industry, training police, and there is no evidence that it changes police behavior. They go to the trainings, and then they just go back to doing what they're doing. But instead of just training them, let's really get in there. This is my repeal and replace thing, my defund thing. Let's change the nature and structure of our police departments and the kind of people that we hire to begin with. Does that not make more sense?
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think that's an excellent point. We should be completely vetting all of the applicants that want to be police officers.
Yeah, I agree. I had a friend when I was Yeah, absolutely. Susan, thank you. When I was in college, I had a friend who was studying police, it was called criminal justice at Michigan State University. But he was taking a course called police science, and I don't know how long the course was or how many terms it was, but his goal was to become a state police officer. And in order to, apparently in Michigan, at least back, this was in 1967, I think it was, or 68. In order to climb up through the ladder in the police department, in the Michigan State Police Department, if you wanted to become, officer is the wrong word, but the equivalent of an officer versus an enlisted man, I'm not sure what the language is that they use. If you wanted to become that, you had to have a college degree. And so Michigan State University was offering, college courses for people who wanted to become professional police officers. I'm assuming that they still do. I mean, that was 50 years ago. And why don't we say anybody who wants to become a police officer has to have a 4-year college degree, or at the very least a 2-year college degree, where they're not only studying police procedures and things. I mean, there was a sign. One of the signs I saw at one of the protests the other day said something, and these numbers, I'm doing this from memory, so these numbers aren't right, but it's approximate. It said something like, to get a license as a cosmetologist in this state, you have to have 1,200 hours of education, but to get a license as a police officer, you have to have 400 hours of education. What's wrong with this picture? And it's like, why don't we have police officers actually study the law, study the Constitution, understand where the First Amendment came from and why and how, and the Fourth Amendment and the Fifth, Sixth, and Seventh and Eighth Amendments, the ones that are generally referred to as due process, the due process amendments, so the right to a speedy trial, the right not to incriminate yourself, all these things. They need to understand this stuff rather than just memorize a Miranda card. But I think that I don't think we can educate our way out of this. I think that we have to have a fundamental change in our systems of policing, and more importantly, in the culture of policing. And that starts in reinventing our entire concept of policing so that it's more like the concept that Canada has rather than the old slave patrol concept that we have.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
So we have a new video up for people who are supporters of the Thom Hartmann Program. Specifically, it's over at thomhartmann.com, talking about language, how we use language. Language matters tremendously. And we have chosen as a society, as a culture, as media, as political leadership, et cetera, not to refer to people like Steve Mnuchin, who threw thousands of people out of their homes illegally during the banking crisis, as looters, not to refer to Rex Tillerson, whose oil company has ravaged much of the third world, literally destroying people's lives, killing people, poisoning people. We don't refer to them as looters. We don't refer to the police who go into neighborhoods and kill people, minorities, particularly African Americans. We don't refer to them as looters, stealing their lives. But when black people rise up and say, no, enough, we call them looters. There's something wrong with this. Check it out. It's at thomhartmann.com. It is the final day, the last day, the last chance to have your contribution to Free Speech TV doubled by Mike in San Francisco, up to $50,000. So call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution, make your voice heard. Here's how I want to help. With a $20 gift, you get a Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the I'm Voting Are You car magnet, your choice. With the $50 gift, you have your choice between the Just Effing Vote tote bag or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, and uniquely, the only thing with the $75 gift is the Thom Hartmann Program mug, which is really cool. The folks at Free Speech TV designed this, and it's they just said, hey, can you send us a picture? We sent a picture, and look at that. With a $100 gift, you can get 2 Free Speech TV face masks, which are really nice face masks that say Free Speech TV on them. With a $120 gift, you have your choice. There's a whole bunch of different options. There is the social distancing kit, which is the 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the Free Speech TV branded hand sanitizer. There is the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. You take your pick of one of these things with a $120 gift. There is the Ask Me About Free Speech TV t-shirt. There is my book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. That book has been out for a few months. It's my newest book that you can purchase right now in the stores. And then there's 4 great books. You take your choice, one of them, if you would like one of those. These are all with a $120 gift. 4 great books on race and race relations in the United States. The new Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, which is this absolutely brilliant look at policing in our prison system, which is particularly, I think, relevant in many ways right now. White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo is a brilliant read. Dear White America by Tim Wise and Uprooting Racism by Paul Kivel. Those 2 books I've not read, I can't speak to, but they come highly recommended to me by the folks at Free Speech TV who worked up this list. And in fact, I'm putting them on my list to read when I'm done writing this book right now in healthcare, which is, I'm just up to here with that. But anyhow, those are your choices, or special bonus for a $120 gift. My newest book, which won't be out for another month or so, but you'll be one of the very first people to get an autographed copy of The Hidden History of Monopoly, How Big Business Stole the American Dream, or destroyed the American Dream, I think is the word in the title. And, so your choice of one of any of those things with a $120 gift, with a $240 gift, join me for a private meet and greet. It's a private conversation, just a few of us, to discuss whatever's on your mind. If you want to ask, anything about anything that I know about my life, about any way I might be helpful to you in any way, by giving you information during that Zoom meeting, $240 gift, and I've had some fascinating conversations. With a $360 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann University box, 2 Free Speech TV face masks, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, the Just Effing Vote tote bag, the I'm Voting Are You car magnet, the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. And with a $1,000 gift, you can get in line to come visit us here in Portland the next time that when we start doing our show from the studio. I have a feeling it's going to be probably well into the winter, but hey, let's plan in advance. So those are the options, and of course you're also welcome to give absolutely any amount that you're comfortable with. And today, last day, today only now, your gift will be doubled by Mike in San Francisco up to $50,000. So please call now. Make your contribution to Free Speech TV. This network needs you. Our program needs you. Perhaps most importantly, the fate and future of our republic, of democracy itself, of America's standing around the world needs you. So not to lay too much on you, too much responsibility, but this is really a big deal. I wouldn't be here doing this every day if I didn't think it was really important. And I know most of the people working with me would not be doing this if they didn't think it was important. There's other things that people can be doing. And we've got some really talented people. There's some great and talented people at Free Speech TV. We need your help. We'll produce the programming. Free Speech TV will keep the network going, keep the electrons flowing, keep them bouncing off those satellites and on the cable systems and on the internets and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that we need from you, the only help that we need from you is twofold. Number one, tell everybody you know about Free Speech TV so that we can expand our viewership base and thus expand our potential donor base. And number two, if you can afford to right now, call 877-378-8669. Tell them you're watching, tell them what you're watching, and tell them which premium you'd like, and make your contribution to Free Speech TV. It's such a vital time. I realize that we're all getting all kinds of appeals from politicians and everybody else that it's a time of crisis for this country. It is for Free Speech TV too. Please call now and help out. Thank you so much.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Was looking through some news stories the other day and saw this amazing piece by Dr. Jhacova Williams, a cultural economist with the Economic Policy Institute, EPI, with their program on race, ethnicity, and the economy. EPI.org is their website. The title was Black Deaths at the Hands of Law Enforcement Are Linked to Historical Lynchings. I found this just extraordinary. Dr. Williams is on the line with us. Dr. Williams' Twitter handle is at JHACOVA, Jhacova. Dr. Williams, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us and for this extraordinary research. I suppose at a certain level it makes sense that those communities that historically have lynched African Americans more frequently than others, shall we say, would have more deaths at the hands of black deaths at the hands of law enforcement officers right now. But what a shocking connection between then and now. Or is it not at all shocking? Is this simply the modern version of lynching? People, I think are correctly referring to what these Minneapolis police did to George Floyd as a lynching. What say you? And what does your research say?
I definitely say that it is a modern day lynching. So one thing I always like to talk about with people is just to discuss what is a definition of a lynching. I think that people think that lynchings are defined by time, but they aren't. They have four characteristics. The first is that there's evidence that someone was killed. The second is that someone was killed illegally. The third is that 3 or more people participated in the killing. And the fourth is that they were claiming tradition to be serving tradition or justice. When you look at George Floyd's killing, what do you see? Video evidence of him being killed, someone kneeling on him until he suffocates, which is illegal. 4 police officers participated in it, and they claim to be serving justice for a supposed $20 counterfeit bill. So it is modern day lynchings. And so I wasn't surprised at all that this thing connected. It's appalling. It's unfortunate, but I am happy that people are reading it. I'm happy that you invited me so that we can actually talk about what's going on and how it connects to the past.
So, Dr. Williams, would it just be too simplistic or even facile to say that what we have here are communities where white supremacy, white racism, white fear, the various dimensions of why white people behave badly around around race, are just basically community traditions, and that's the point at which it needs to be attacked. That's the root that needs to be pulled up with this weed. Or is it something more less visible, less obvious, a little more sophisticated or complex, I guess would be the right word?
I think both things are true. And so you said at the beginning, I'm a cultural economist. And what that means is I look at how historical events continue to influence the economic and political behavior, in particular of Black individuals in the South. And what I found in my research is that there is a tradition of racism. Racism persists over time. And that's what you're seeing in these counties. You're actually seeing that these counties that can be linked with lynchings, they also can be linked with low voter turnout amongst blacks. You see that these areas also have a higher percentage of blacks who are killed by police officers. And I don't think that this is a coincidence. I think the good thing about this research is that it highlights that, hey, there is something called racism. It does persist over time. It has been a part of tradition. It's been a part of the culture in certain communities. And once we identify it, we next need to identify how do we stop that. And I think the first thing is talking about it. Actually just saying that, yes, history matters. I always say, if you look at my Twitter, the first thing that I tweeted was that history matters. And I think a lot of times we want to shy away from history, but we have to confront it. And I think we have to work with people like myself, economists, academics, grassroots organizations, people in law enforcement, and we need to come up with some type of remedy for this issue that's called racism.
Dr. Williams, I've told this story a few times on the show recently about how my wife, when she was in high school in East Lansing, Michigan, had to take Black Studies class, and it was an all-white school. But it changed her life, I mean, in a really consequential way, her understanding of race. I didn't have that experience in Lansing, Michigan, but I didn't finish high school, which is a whole long story. I got kicked out for publishing an underground newspaper and ended up going straight to college. But but that's the sort of thing that it seems. I mean, if it's parents teaching their kids their own racism, which seems like the simplest, most straightforward explanation for this, the place where you can get between the parent and the child is in the schools. Is it not? And might that not be the place, in these communities that have not only historical lynchings, but also now contemporary murders by police and low voter turnout of minorities and things because of the structural engineering of the local power system, the political power system? Isn't that where we should be trying to intervene at the level of elementary, junior high, or middle schools and high schools?
I could not agree with you more. So I'm talking about stories, I'm from New Orleans, so that's where the beautiful accent comes from. And one thing about New Orleans is that people love New Orleans and they love, to come for Mardi Gras, to drink, party. But one thing that they don't realize about New Orleans is that it's a very segregated city. I went to all black schools my entire life. So elementary, middle, and high school. My middle school was named Thurgood Marshall, but 2 years prior to me attending it, it was named Beauregard. And it was named Beauregard from its founding date. And you actually had black people arguing for the fact that a school that had 100% black population attending it went to a school named after a Confederate general, and how crazy this was. And so it's one of those things where I didn't actually have my first black friend until I went to grad school. Because, again, New Orleans is so segregated and people don't see that. And so one thing that I think that is huge is that we have to look at how we're teaching our students. So, like the books that they read, but not only that, sorry, I'm getting emails, but not only just the books that they read, but just who they interact with. We live very segregated lives, and I wish that really people could look at that. When you're going to the grocery store, who do you see at your grocery store? If you believe in God, if you're going to church, who's at that church worshiping with you? So I think it starts with education, but I think that we need to really have more interaction with each other to realize that we really are a human race. We are the same. And once we can see each other that way, I think that it helps us to erase this problem that we have, which is racism. Yeah.
And I've been, in fact, I just had this discussion with a caller in the last hours who was saying, well, we just need to teach our police better. And I'm like, no, we need different kinds of police. We need to change the structure of our policing. But here we're talking about teaching our kids better. Are there other structural changes that could be made that would help in the minute we have left here before we're going to hit a hard break? Are there other changes that we can make that will help flush racism out of white culture, in your opinion?
Oh, for sure. One thing that I think is huge, I'm a big voting advocate. And so one thing that I want to do is ease the voting policies that we have. And so I think that we need to expand our voting methods. I think what you just saw in Georgia, in particular in Atlanta, is just a travesty. So I think that when we actually have racist policies, racist politicians, we need to make sure that people can vote these people out of office. And we need to also support new politicians as well who have new and innovative ideas. There is nothing called race-neutral policies. Either a policy is racist or it's not. And so we need to make sure that we're very clear about that. And again, when we see that someone's implementing racist policies, that we make sure that everyone has a right to vote, to voice how they feel about that, and to vote people out. That's my main thing.
Right. Call it out, identify it. Some of these people I don't think can be shamed, but I get your point. And then have people voting people with goodwill. Amen. Dr. Jhacova Williams, PhD, cultural economist, Economic Policy Institute, EPI.org is the website, with the Race, Ethnicity, and Economy program. Dr. Williams, thank you again so much for dropping by today. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my pleasure. Nice meeting you. We'll be back. It's 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Stick around. We'll be right back in just a moment. And welcome back. Jerry in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Jerry, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today? Jerry? I am not hearing Jerry. I'll put Jerry on hold. Jerry's on line 7, Joyce, if you want to pick that up and see what's going on. Randy in San Leandro, California. Hey, Randy, what's on your mind today?
I really appreciate your show, and my question to you or to the American people is, why can't we put our fingerprints on our voting ballots? Like we
do to a certain extent. I mean, that's the whole point. You know, long before we had voter ID, I mean, literally when I was 7 years old and my mom was working at the local elementary school signing people in to vote, and I used to sit there with her and watch her do it. You had a card when you first registered to vote. You'd fill out this card and you would sign it. And she would pull that card out and you'd have to sign the book. As you came in, you said, you know, my name is Joe Blow, and she'd say, sign there. She'd sign it, and she's looking at the card as she's looking at the signature. That's biometric identification. It's harder to fake than buying a phony ID. It's almost impossible to fake a signature when it's done in real time. And even when it's not done in real time, it's almost impossible. I mean, that's why forgery is, you know, half art, half science. And so, you know, we've always used biometric identification. This idea that you need to have an ID to vote is crazy. This was just another voter suppression effort that the Republicans came up with to make it harder for people who don't, you know, who live in big cities and don't own cars, for example, to vote, or people who are over 65 and don't drive anymore to vote, or, you know, students who have not yet started voting. You know, Randy, that's it.
Is there also a verification that we could know that our vote has been accounted for?
I believe in most states you can look yourself up on the state's Secretary of State's website and see if your vote was recorded, if you are listed as having voted. Now, whether that would include things like provisional ballots, which may not be counted, but you may still register as having voted, I don't know, because that's going to vary from state to state how they implement that. And on that, I would refer you to the expert on this stuff, which would be Brad Friedman with his Brad blog website, and or Greg Palast. Randy, thank you for the call. Tony in Yachats, Oregon. Am I saying it right, Tony?
Yachats.
Okay, Yachats.
You got to come
What's
down
up?
here, Tom. It's paradise. But in any event, that's not why I'm calling. When I was in college, back in the day, I decided to go into psychology, and I specialized in psychometry, which was the measurement and testing of people. Didn't go anywhere where they've got a master's in it, and then Reagan came in and shut down all the mental health clinics. But in any event, while I was studying, one of the tests that we used was the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. And that has a scale that was used for measuring pre-employment, and it was often used in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and God, I don't know.
Tony, we are going to hit a break here. What's your point?
The point is that it should be used again. It was really good at finding psychopaths and violent behavior and things like that. And I don't know why those things aren't used, except I suspect that benevolent associations, they were very, very personal tests.
Yeah, you may well be right. And I'm very familiar with the MMPI, and I would not object to it being used with regard to police officers. Thank you, Tom. We'll be back.
Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. So we have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com for people who are signed up, for supporters of our program. And it's about how Donald Trump, 16 days after Mr. Khashoggi was murdered by the Saudis in Turkey and his body dismembered and vanished, 16 days after that happened, without notifying Congress and with virtually no mention to anybody, Donald Trump authorized the transfer of top secret nuclear technology to the Saudis. This should be a serious issue. Tim Kaine, the senator from Virginia, is raising hell about it because Khashoggi lived in Virginia. But I think everybody in Congress should be raising hell about this. And when you back this up with this new report out from ProPublica that the Saudis were involved in 9/11, it gets real interesting. So you can check that out over at thomhartmann.com. You know, look for our basically members-only video. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A couple of other things I wanted to bring up and kind of set the table for conversation as well. First of all, just this is kind of falls into the category of interesting stuff. Donald Trump lives in such a bubble that when Fox News and CNN and all these other news agencies were reporting that he was 14 points down from Joe Biden, he hired this poll guy to evaluate the poll. And the guy said, well, you know, maybe there's some things wrong with this poll, and maybe this is an attempt to suppress the Donald Trump vote. People will figure there's no way he's going to win, and so they just won't show up to vote. Well, first of all, that's kind of weird logic because I think it actually works kind of the other way around. I suspect that there's a lot of people, for example, in 2016, Mark Pocan talks about how, you know, in Wisconsin, 200,000 plus people who had voted for Barack Obama never showed up to vote for Hillary Clinton. He attributes that to her running a lackluster campaign. And there's no doubt that that happened. I would add, though, that the conventional wisdom across the news media was so strong that there was no way that Trump was going to win, that Clinton had this thing in the bag, that probably a lot of Clinton voters just said, why bother? So anyhow, Trump's logic is completely wrong, but he's suing. He sent a cease and desist letter to Jeff Zucker, the president of CNN, demanding an apology for attempting to suppress the vote of Trump voters by publishing a phony poll. Of course, it's not a phony poll. The Washington Post poll says the same thing. The Ipsos poll says the same thing. All the polls basically say the same thing. That said, we are 6 months out or 5 months out from the election. And anything can happen in 5 months. 5 months is forever in politics. 5 months is 5 years in politics. You want to know the trends, the political trends? Wait until October. But even don't forget that. You know, James Comey came out in the last week of October, a week before the election 4 years ago, and said, oh, we're going to reopen the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. Boom! Shaved 2 points, 1.5, 2 points off Hillary Clinton's 3 million vote margin of victory. So, anyhow, just FYI. This other story is one that I'm frankly really conflicted about, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I remember, must be 10 years ago, it was more than, maybe even a little more than 10 years ago, we were living back here in Oregon. I was doing the morning show on KPOJ, and I was doing my afternoon show on Air America. And Louise and I were living in a floating home community south of here, down on the Willamette River. And I had never seen the movie Birth of a Nation, which was the first full-length movie ever made. I mean, the first actual full-length movie, and it's a silent film, as I recall. And it was a big deal when it came out. It was screened by Woodrow Wilson, who was a Democrat, but nonetheless a fulminating racist. He genuinely was a white supremacist. It was previewed by him in the White House, and it got national news. It was seen in theaters all across the United States, and it was basically a recruiting film for the Ku Klux Klan. And Birth of a Nation is about how after the Civil War, black people were taking political power, particularly in the Carolinas and in Georgia,
and sitting and eating watermelon in the state capitol without shoes on, that kind of thing. And I mean, it's just filled with racist. And Louise and I watched that, and I got this, oh my God. In that moment, in a way that I never could have really gotten, I think, in any other way, understood the deep, pernicious, unquestioned nature of racism in 1913 in the white community in America, and where it was coming from, and the stories that white people were telling themselves about history. Well, HBO has pulled Gone with the Wind. Now, they say they're going to bring it back, and when I first saw that they pulled it, I said, well, why don't they just put a 2 or 3 minute thing at the beginning and maybe a 20 or 30 minute thing at the end that talks about how racist basically Gone with the Wind is. And I confess, I've never watched Gone with the Wind. I know what the story is. You know, I had to, when I was in elementary school, as I recall, I read a Cliff Notes thing on it. But, you know, it's set in the American Civil War, and it portrays slavery as slaves as basically happy people, enslaved people as, oh, yeah, everything's good. But is that a good idea? To pull it out of circulation, essentially? Or should we be going out of our way to watch these pieces of our racist history so that we can realize, particularly white people, realize how this stuff was embedded in us? How this race awareness, for lack of a, which obviously leads to racism, was just poured into our brains as children and as young adults by our media. Or, hey, it's racist on its face, let's just get rid of it. Which is the best way to deal with this? I frankly think I could argue either one. I certainly think it needs to be labeled. It needs to be identified. It needs to be clearly identified as having racist content. So what do you think? And of course, we got a lot of other stuff we've talked about today. We'll pick up your calls.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
On the other side of this break. Plus, there are 17 big corporations bankrolling the guy who wants to be our next fascist president, Tom Cotton. We'll get to that, too. It is the final day, the last day, the last chance to have your contribution to Free Speech TV doubled by Mike in San Francisco, up to $50,000. So call now, 877-378-8669, and make your contribution, make your voice heard. Here's how I want to help. With a $20 gift, you get a Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker or the I'm Voting Are You car magnet, your choice. With the $50 gift, you have your choice between the Just Effing Vote tote bag or the Free Speech TV webcam cover. With a $75 gift, and uniquely, the only thing with the $75 gift is the Thom Hartmann Program mug, which is really cool. The folks at Free Speech TV designed this, and it's they just said, hey, can you send us a picture? We sent a picture, and look at that. With a $100 gift, you can get 2 Free Speech TV face masks, which are really nice face masks that say Free Speech TV on them. With a $120 gift, you have your choice. There's a whole bunch of different options. There is the social distancing kit, which is the 2 Free Speech TV face masks and the Free Speech TV branded hand sanitizer. There is the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. You take your pick of one of these things with a $120 gift. There is the Ask Me About Free Speech TV t-shirt. There is my book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. That book has been out for a few months. It's my newest book that you could purchase right now in the stores. And then there's 4 great books. You take your choice, one of them, if you would like one of those. These are all with a $120 gift. 4 great books on race and race relations in the United States. The new Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, which is this absolutely brilliant look at policing in our prison system, which is particularly, I think, relevant in many ways right now. White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo is a brilliant read. Dear White America by Tim Wise and Uprooting Racism by Paul Kivel. Those two books I've not read, I can't speak to, but they come highly recommended to me by the folks at Free Speech TV who worked up this list. And in fact, I'm putting them on my list to read when I'm done writing this book right now on healthcare, which is, I'm just up to here with that. But anyhow, those are your choices, or special bonus for a $120 gift. My newest book, which won't be out for another month or so, but you'll be one of the very first people to get an autographed copy of The Hidden History of Monopoly, How Big Business Stole the American Dream, or Destroyed the American Dream, I think is the word in the title. And, so your choice of one of any of those things with a $120 gift, with a $240 gift to join me for a private meet and greet. It's a private conversation, just a few of us, to discuss whatever's on your mind. If you want to ask, anything about anything that I know about my life, about any way I might be helpful to you in any way, by giving you information during that Zoom meeting, $240 gift, and we've had some fascinating conversations. With a $360 gift, there's the Thom Hartmann University box, 2 Free Speech TV face masks, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, the Just Effing Vote tote bag, the I'm Voting Are You car magnet, the Just Effing Vote t-shirt. And with a $1,000 gift, you can get in line to come visit us here in Portland the next time that when we start doing our show from the studio. I have a feeling it's going to be probably well into the winter, but hey, let's plan in advance. So those are the options, and of course you're also welcome to give absolutely any amount that you're comfortable with. And today, last day, today only now, your gift will be doubled by Mike in San Francisco up to $50,000. So please call now. Make your contribution to Free Speech TV. This network needs you. Our program needs you. Perhaps most importantly, the fate and future of our republic, of democracy itself, of America's standing around the world needs you. So not to lay too much on you, too much responsibility, but this is really a big deal. I wouldn't be here doing this every day if I didn't think it was really important. And I know most of the people working with me would not be doing this if they didn't think it was important. There's other things that people can be doing. And we've got some really talented people. There's some great and talented people at Free Speech TV. We need your help. We'll produce the programming. Free Speech TV will keep the network going, keep the electrons flowing, keep them bouncing off those satellites and on the cable systems and on the internets and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that we need from you, the only help that we need from you is twofold. Number one, tell everybody you know about Free Speech TV so that we can expand our viewership base and thus expand our potential donor base. And number two, if you can afford to right now, call 877-378-8669. Tell them you're watching, tell them what you're watching, and tell them which premium you'd like, and make your contribution to Free Speech TV. It's such a vital time. I realize that we're all getting all kinds of appeals from politicians and everybody else that it's a time of crisis for this country. It is for Free Speech TV too. Please call now and help out. Thank you so much. Coming up on this week's Science Revolution, how do we stop authoritarians like Trump and Bolsonaro from killing more people in this pandemic? Trump and Bolsonaro, the presidents of the United States and Brazil, are essentially refusing to do anything consequential about an epidemic that is killing massive numbers of their own country's citizens. Bill Freese drops by. He's the science policy analyst with the Center for Food Safety on the newly finalized federal regulations on GMOs. And Beyond Nuclear's Paul Gunter also drops by on how America is unprepared for a nuclear accident during this pandemic. Find the Science Revolution wherever you get great podcasts. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. D. Hahnemann over on Twitter tweets, Tom, just watch Gone with the Wind. It is art. It does not need a warning. The story speaks for itself. You are missing an important piece of culture. The movie is not, all caps, NOT, history, but it inspires a study of history. The movie is not the book. The movie is worthwhile. Enjoy it. Well, I confess I haven't read the book either. But like I said, I'm pretty sure I read the Cliff Notes way back when, although maybe not. It's so anyway, so much to talk about. The Tom Cotton stuff, I'm gonna hold on to this for tomorrow, because I think that this is, I want to do a little deeper dive than that, and frankly like to leave the last half hour of the show for your calls. So let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Jose in Toledo, Ohio. Hey, Jose, what's on your mind today?
Well, you were discussing about the movie, and that's what how racist it is. And I've sat through most of it. I couldn't sit through all of it, but I find that when I went to college at Bowling Green State University, we had an ethnic studies department, and our Latino Student Union pushed to have the elective on the elective list for students to take ethnic studies classes, which were Black history, Latino, Native American, or Asian people history, just to further try to open their minds up, to what they could learn before they left college, other than the picture they were painted by the skimpy stories in history books in high school, which is like 2 pages for the Native American struggle, maybe 3/4 of a page for Latino immigration, where they got nothing, And I think I was talking to the person who answered your phone that we need to push to have the history books be more reality based, almost, not some myth about the manifest destiny, which is a racist concept in itself, but the actual struggle and how did America get where it's at. America was born on genocide. And, a lot of people don't want to hear that, but, the destruction of Native people here was how America became great. And that same philosophy expanded when they became an empire. Always the nature of capitalism. You have to dominate somebody so they can be stronger, I guess. Somebody has to lose and somebody has to win, basically. Yeah,
and it goes beyond capitalism. I'd say even imperialism. But Jose, are you suggesting that HBO should or should not have pulled that movie from circulation?
If they're going to play it, I think they have to really explain prior to showing that this is some fictional piece of work, because being a slave, or being, in the case of Latinos, under the encomienda of the Spanish crown in Mexico, you're basically a slave. It's no vacation. In the encomienda, people belong. If a guy got land, the people came with it, with basically ownership. It's no vacation. And yet, the portrayal, the African-American maid in that movie, it's like she's loyal to these people. And to myself, I just couldn't envision in real life people being that loyal unless you were the taskmaster. But no, I think if they're going to show it, I guess they were great actors, but did it show reality? And unfortunately, people take movies at face value and not really look into the real story,
Yeah, well, and this is, I think this is fairly clearly a period piece, but point well made. Jose, thank you. Thank you for calling, and thank you for sharing your perspective with us. Tony in Long Beach, California, your thoughts?
I don't think they should pull it, because half of the movies in there they would need to pull because of the racist imagery and everything else. This whole thing, it's so exhausting. There is no way you should go tit for tat. What people of color and then black people, because I'm black, is separate and not even worry about it. The thing that most so-called minorities, which we're not, if you look on the world stage, is worrying about what white people are doing and how we can reach them and how we can no. White people, you have to do what you have to do to realize your own racism. Everybody else, brown people, black people, we need to build our communities and keep it pushing and keep our money in our communities, do what Jewish people do what Asian people do, and they don't care what is going on in society. They don't have to, because they control their communities. And that's what we need to do, because if we start this tit for tat and trying to figure out what's racist, what's not, you know what is and what isn't. And white people do too. So you need to take. Einstein said racism is the disease of white people. Einstein said that.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, but I would say also that for Jewish people living in Poland and Germany, essentially self-isolating or living in small, tight communities, didn't work out so well in the 1930s and early 1940s.
But we're talking about now.
Yeah, so you're suggesting that we should not be an integrated society, that we should be a segregated society, Tony?
It's not going to happen in that sense, but Jewish people here in the United States are somewhat segregated. They have their own communities. Italian people.
I don't think so.
Pardon me?
I mean, yeah, you've got some areas where you've got neighborhoods that might describe themselves as ethnic neighborhoods, Italian, Jewish, Irish, whatever. But by and large, I would say that most of the groups that had historic, essentially racism directed at them, Jewish people, Italian people, and Irish people, have largely integrated themselves into the larger white culture, in quotes, and which raises this whole other question that back in the day Malcolm X was talking about, which is that the culture everybody should have? I mean, how do we define our culture? Although it seems to me, and I don't present myself as any authority on this, that our entire culture, as we become more integrated, for lack of a better word, is changing in a positive direction, in a more pluralistic direction.
But it's still gradual. It's still on the terms that white supremacy puts out there. All I'm saying is, let's face it, American culture is based on a lot of black culture. We created jazz. We created blues. We created rap. Everybody's making money off of it but us. And all I'm saying is, like Malcolm would say, is to separate into your own communities. It's already there. The integration hasn't really happened. Not really, or we wouldn't have police killing us the way they do. So my thing is, I'm not worried about trying to get you to understand your racism or how you've treated me, or what I can do is pull my money into my community, build my community, make sure my children are educated or have health care or whatever, and not waste another ounce of energy having a kumbaya moment. It's just not working. It hasn't worked in 400 years.
Except, Tony, I get it. I totally get what you're saying, except that the levers of power in this society are almost entirely controlled by white people. I mean, the 10 richest Americans, 100% white. Congress, 90% white. U.S. governors, 96% white. Top military advisors, 100% white. House Freedom Caucus, 100% white. Presidential cabinet, 99% white. People who decide which books we read, 90% white. People who decide which news is covered, 85% white. Teachers, 82% white. College professors, 84% white. People who directed the top 100 grossing films, 95% white. I mean, if we're all living in this society, you and me being, you being black, me being white, we're all living together in this society, and that society, the power structure of that society is white, don't we have an obligation to, both of us, both you and me, to do what we can to change the dimensions of the white society to work for everybody?
How has it happened? How have we done it so far? It's that way because of a plan and white supremacy. So I'm not going to worry about trying to. I can worry about my own community. I can't do that. It's
I get it.
Because there's
and I can see forgive my talking over you, Tony. We're going to hit a break here in just a second, but I can kind of see my own answer to my own question is this is a white people problem. White people started this problem, caused this problem. White people have to fix this problem. What say you?
So,
real quick.
There we go. That we can agree on.
Yes, no? Okay,
yes.
Tony, thank you very much. Great to hear from you. Good talking with you. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day right after this. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. The place where we dare to ask, is Walmart a person? No, not a chance. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's your media support group for We the People. Stick around. We'll be right back. And welcome back. And David in Spotswood, New Jersey. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hey, my thoughts today might be very simplistic, a bit complicated, depending on where you sit. I think there's something in our culture that prevents us from moving forward, and that's basically just the basic understanding that feelings aren't facts and facts aren't feelings. I'll give a quick example. Two examples. One is, when we say defund the police, people have suggestions. They might be well-intentioned, but they're feelings. The facts are that 469,000 teachers have been laid off, and a lot of state governors are talking about more layoffs. Where I live in New Jersey, the governor is saying he's going to have to lay off 200,000 people. So defund the police might be a harsh-sounding word, but if you look at the percentages and whatnot, there really is no other choice but to defund the police, unless our values are that we want to live like in East Germany in the 1980s. The second thing I want to respond to is I personally try to stick up for minorities. There's a law that was an ordinance that was in a village I used to live in that said that they deliberately did not follow the New York state law. That means that if you're accosted of that law, your due process rights or your 14th Amendment rights are being violated, because you have to be able to understand a law to comply with it. And I was actually going to have all my tickets wiped out, but I chose to stick up for minorities, because minorities, the law said you could be ticketed. It was only a parking violation, but you could be ticketed between 3 and 5 in the morning, and it would mostly fall on minorities. So as a white person, I took my white responsibility to stand up on it. Well, I have to tell you that the first thing I said in that courtroom when I said this is unconstitutional, I had 6 policemen surrounding me, and it was scary. And then from there on in, I literally got chased out of the village because I got a boatload of traffic tickets where I wasn't even guilty. So I'll just say,
David, okay, I get your point that you're concerned about teachers, and the rest of it I frankly don't get. Leonard in Wilmington, North Carolina. Hey, Leonard, what's on your mind?
How you doing? Listening to your show, my mind's all over the place now. But I'd originally called in to speak about the police. My feelings on the police, I think one major problem they have, and it goes all the way up to the top in the police department, is their so-called unspoken blue code of silence. That's when the unspoken rule, many police agencies in the country, is a code of honor. Well, they call it a code of honor. I don't say how it's a code of honor. But it's a code of honor in the police brotherhood, where giving information about another police officer's wrongdoings is considered an act of betrayal. Well, that to me is equivalent of obstruction of justice, or even conspiracy. I think if they're going to retrain these police, they need to go all the way to the top and do it, not unlike most of America's military academies and schools and colleges do. They have a code of honor.
Yeah, fix the whole thing. Leonard, I agree with you. Thank you. Hey, Thom Hartmann here. I have a new book out. It's called The Hidden History of Monopolies, How Big Business Destroyed the American Dream, and Ralph Nader wrote the foreword. It's available for pre-order wherever you find fine books. So we've got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these three guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical, ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit, and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson, and the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Gilbert in San Antonio, Texas. Hey, Gilbert, what's on your mind?
Fine. How you doing, Tom? I'm 75 years old. I was born in 1944 on the east side in San Antonio, Texas. And I was what you might call a Malcolm X boy during the 60s and stuff. And so I just want to say I've seen this, what's going on now, so many times before. I was about 12 or 13 years old when Emmett Till was in the Jet magazine. And I am just fed up with every time something like this happens. Like, the focus should stay on black men being shot down by cops. And it doesn't. What happens is every time there's a mass thing about black men being killed, then everybody else gets in on it. You know, we have to make sure we save the children at the border. And we got to make sure that we talk about the indigenous Indians being, and I'm not saying those things were right. I'm just saying that, and they were all wrong, just as it's wrong to kill black men and stuff. But what happens is people are in the street about black men being shot and killed. And every talk show that you hear now, you can just see the conversation swaying over to other social problems. We've had social problems for 200 years in the United States. Let's just take one at a time and get it done. I do not support police. I think we should do away with police departments, not just kick them out, but do away with them and phase them in with another type of police, because black people have no chance under this system. We just don't have a chance. And I've lived 75 years, and I've been accosted so much about white police officers, and I'm just lucky to be alive. And I'm just fed up with, I see things going on. I graduated from the University of Houston and California State College at Bakersfield and Prairie View A&M. And so I have an education and I have an opinion. And I'm just tired of seeing what happens. Whenever black people come to the forefront, everybody else gets in on it and the focus is changed. And that's all I got to say.
Well, you said it very well, Gilbert. And I totally get it. And I salute your perspective. There is a crisis in this country of police behaving badly broadly, but the tip of that spear, the point of that crisis, is police in the United States killing black men, and to a very smaller degree, black women. I mean, look at Sandra Bland, for example. You know, I can't add anything more to it. Thank you very much, Gilbert. Good to hear from you. Kathleen in Lexington, Kentucky. Hey, Kathleen, what's on your mind?
Hello?
No, Kathleen. Oh, yeah, there you go, Kathleen.
Hi, can
what's
you hear
up?
me?
I can.
Well, I got two things. First of all, I agree with making cops get insurance. Second of all is what the doctor in the previous section said about starting young. A lot of people don't know it, but children learn racism in school, because if you've ever heard of Jane Elliott, she does a documentary way back in history about...
that's the blue eyes, brown eyes experiment?
The full version of it is on A Class Divided on YouTube. The full thing put out by Frontline.
Right.
Everybody can watch that. But in another video, she also points out that the maps, the world maps in all schools are geographically wrong because they train young eyes onto majority-controlled white countries. Okay, for instance, Greenland looks like a large landmass, but at the bottom of those same very maps, the legend says South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland, but visually it doesn't look that way.
Yeah, that has to do with how we do our, how you represent a sphere on a flat surface.
There's also the fact she points out that never in the majority of history classes does any of them teach the Mountain Meadow Massacre where Mormons killed white settlers and blamed Native Americans. Okay, which is how we assassinated Native Americans. They were called savages, and took over the Black Hills kind of thing. So what we need to do is start young, change the maps, change the history to where you're teaching actual history and not white racist history. And by the way, I'm white, and I was blessed to have an actual good teacher in high school who taught these things.
Yeah.
So I don't have the same views. Okay, thank you.
I get it. You're welcome. And I think that's why we're seeing so much pushback right now. Several statues of Christopher Columbus, not just in the United States, but around the world in the last week have been taken down or broken up. One was beheaded. There's a connection here. This is all one thing. Racism, imperialism, capitalism, this entire corrupt system. And it needs to be repealed and replaced, as we say. Anyhow, this thing, our country doesn't work without you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Be good to yourself and those around you, please. And have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.